Afternoon, I'm going to call this budget meeting of May 6, 2013 to order. Please rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Francisco. Hotchkiss. House.
Here.
Murillo. Here. Rouse. White. Mayor Schneider.
Here. We have one public comment speaker. It's sort of on the edge of on the agenda, but why don't you come on up, Tom Jacobs.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. I want to just comment on the Public Works Streets Transportation item in the budget that's probably going to be discussed a little bit later in the capital program. I want to ask you to move the schedule up. What we're seeing here is the 2013, 14, 14, 15, and 15, 16 year budgets not showing any expenditure on the project, which is pedestrian enhancement from the Mission to the Natural History Museum. On behalf of the Concerned Citizens for Safe Passage, I would like to request that the city consider funding a portion at least of a survey that will be required to provide us with very accurate base maps that can help in the design process for the current Caltrans community grant, community planning transportation grant that the city is on the books with the county. It was my understanding that that's the reason why we don't see any expenditure this year, is that the city is the silent partner, as it were. But there is about $100,000 in grant money going towards that project. Additionally, our group, which is comprised of stakeholders all along all of the area of that route, have contributed over $100,000 in time and effort to this project. So we need a survey in order to make the design portion of the grant be as thorough as possible and as accurate as possible. And I would just like to put in the word of a request that the city consider anteing up for a portion of that. The estimate is $55,000 from the county surveyor.
Great. Do you know when the Caltrans grant, whether or not we will receive that grant, when the timing of that is?
It has been received, and it will start shortly, and it runs for...
We got the grant. So
yes.
off we go. Okay,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
good. Great. Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
May I? What is the figure that the city would be responsible for if we decided to do it? I mean, do you...
Go ahead.
Is that obvious?
Ms. Anderson?
I missed it.
Madam Mayor and Councilwoman,
Maria.
thank you, I'm sorry. The clerk's head was in the way. We have signed an MOU in terms of the arrangement between the county and the city and the Safe Passage Group, and we are providing staff support as this contract with the use of the Caltrans money is moving forward. We have no subsequent projects or funding identified, and it's going to, I think, be based on what we find out with the results of this planning effort that's currently underway. And my understanding of the discussions with the group and as part of the MOU is that once the study is completed and there's some identification of what next steps might look like, we would be looking for grant funding to continue with that project.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Thank you very much. Yep. Okay. Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, Christine Anderson, Director of Public Works. We're here today to present the Public Works Department budget to you. This will be the proposed fiscal year 14 budget with the forecast for fiscal year 15. I first of all would like to thank, there we go. I'd like to thank Michelle DeCant, who is our admin division manager and responsible for both putting the department budget together and coordinating with finance department in our contribution to the putting together of the entire city budget presentation. Michelle's probably the only person who could do a solo presentation of our department budget. So as a reward, she gets to get a bye on the presentation side of things and will be available to assist us in answering questions, I'm sure. I also wanted to recognize Kathy Kiefauver for assistance in putting together our PowerPoint presentation this afternoon. And also, she's here to help support any CIP-related questions. So with that, I'd like to move into our presentation. I am going to be assisted today with the division managers represented on the slide, Pat Kelly, Gary Horwald, Jim Dewey, Browning Allen, and Rebecca Bjork. We will be doing a brief presentation. I'll provide an overview of the department, and then each of the division managers will go into their program area responsibilities. And we will allow some brief questions after each of the speakers has completed their presentation, recognizing that we will have time at the end for questions as well. So wanting to kind of keep things moving, but also not have you hold questions for too long after a portion of the presentation is complete. So in the Public Works Department budget, you will find most of the presentation of Public Works in two sections. Section E in your budget document is the capital program, and Section G is the Public Works Department budget. We will be linking back to those budget pages as we go through the presentation, just to kind of keep things linked. This is a diagram of our organizational chart for the Public Works Department. We have 6 divisions, and within those divisions, we have 29 budget programs that are represented in our budget, department budget in your document. Page H344 identifies all of our budget programs, with the exception of Facilities Capital, which is the new one for fiscal year 14. But otherwise, you can kind of align the budget programs with how they fit in the division structure from that diagram. For fiscal year 14, and forecasted with no change for fiscal year 15, we have 289.95 FTE, 14 managers, 32 supervisors, and 243.95 general employees. We actually have a .05 position that has been reallocated. That's the yard maintenance person that supports a variety of departments. And so that's the .05 anomaly that you'll see on the slide. But essentially, we have 1.5 FTE increase in the water fund. Half of that, 1/2 FTE, I believe you heard in the Community Development Department budget, relates to a position that we've been sharing for the last probably 3 years as part of the budget reduction strategy. We took on the financial support for 1/2 an FTE, and that person from Community Development has been providing support to the Water Division. We are acknowledging and recognizing that 1/2 FTE of work that has been carried in our budget as an offset to the Community Development Department budget. And as they're looking at bringing that person back into their full-time, we will need to replace that 1/2 FTE of work. And that's the reconciliation that you're seeing with the 1/2 FTE. In addition, we have a 1 FTE increase in the water budget, and Rebecca Bjork will be covering that in her presentation on the water and wastewater programs. As I mentioned, we have 29 performance-based budget programs that are included in our P3 descriptions. For fiscal year 14, this is a diagram of how the funds within the department operating budget of $82,660,516 are made up. There's a more detailed listing of the operating expenditures by fund on page H342 in your document, but this captures them in what I think is more traditional for your work with it in terms of the funds themselves. So essentially, water makes up 40% of our operating budget. Wastewater is next at 18%. Streets is 13%. Downtown parking is 9%. General fund is 9%. And then we have smaller pieces of the ICS facilities and the ICS fleet management and street sweeping. And this is the total expenditures by major object in terms of what they're used for. So as you can see, for the $83 million budget for Public Works in fiscal year 14, approximately 42% is salary and benefits, 30% is supplies and services, about 9% is water purchases, and that makes up roughly 80% plus of our total budget, with then small allocations for special projects, capital equipment, debt service, that sort of thing. But you can see the bulk of our expenditures are really in the supplies and services category. This is a picture of our of our expenditures by major object, including the capital program, which brings our total budget up to roughly $117 million. The capital program included in that pie chart makes up 30% of the overall $117 million operating and capital budget. Now I'm going to talk briefly about the general fund overview. As I mentioned, general fund makes up 9% of our overall operating budget. We have 4 primary program areas that are general funded. One is in administration, one is in land development and real property, and in engineering services, both in the engineering division, and then environmental compliance, which is found in the facilities division. Of that, 9%, $7,452,000, roughly 84% is salary and benefits. And of the $7,452,000 allocation, essentially 90% of that is revenue backed, either through engineering and land development service charges or overhead and interfund reimbursements. So the non-revenue portion of the general fund budget for Public Works is roughly 9.8%, $730,000. In the administration division, essentially, this is Michelle DeCant's division. We have a program focused on support to the department as a whole. This is where we oversee all of the financial management functions, the fund management, the tracking of the budget, looking at fees and charges, our rate structures, supporting the divisions in each of their different fund responsibility areas. This is where the P3 coordination occurs and where the oversight of the council agenda reports for the department is handled. So it's sort of the grease that makes the rest of the department move. And with that, if you have any questions about the overarching pieces, I think probably we can go forward into the next group. If you have any clarifying questions or burning issues, please let me know. Okay. I'd like to introduce Pat Kelly, and he's going to provide a report on the engineering division programs in the fiscal year 14 budget.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. Here is most but not all of the 50 or so professional and technical staff in the Public Works Engineering Division. Engineering Division has 3 operational programs. The engineering services, where we have tasks associated with coordinating and delivering the large and small capital or public works construction contracts for the city. We also staff the department's public works counter at 630 Garden Street. also working with the community development and fire departments. We are part of the city's land development team. And also, of course, we now have the traffic engineering expertise for improving vehicular and pedestrian safety throughout the city. For focusing now on the engineering services program, and you can refer to pages 348 through 350 of the budget. A task for us is to efficiently deliver coordinated city designs and the construction of a quality city capital program. The city has a significant amount of major infrastructure to maintain, as represented by the aging of some of our large key infrastructure, our water and sewer treatment plants, and our streets we'll be talking about a little bit later. Some of this is identified by this coming year, this current fiscal year. We're going to be completing $75 million worth of capital work, and next year over 55. We have in progress over 68 projects and the value of approximately $175 million of work in progress. So there's a lot to do. We support other departments and the division fund managers in also administering some of their professional service contracts that go mostly focused towards capital work. Also, as engineering, we provide general planning and consultation for the city's 6-year CIP. And not infrequently, we work with the city attorney's office in defense of the city regarding various litigation. Here's some photos of engineering staff in action. That's always tough to get an engineering in action. It's just like it was the guy over his drafting table. It's kind of hard to catch. But here we actually do have our inspection staff doing a pressure inspection of a pressure test. Then also we're doing a significant amount of support for our water resources, wastewater division. In this particular case, we are plumbing down a manhole to get some data. Assisting in the Water Resources Division in the analyzing flows of the city's sewer, inspection for delivering a quality construction, and also the photo in the middle on the bottom is just an example of some of the emergencies that randomly come up, in this particular case, the Conejo landslide. So capital improvement construction can create quite a mess, and you can see that by the photo on the top. Here is the intersection of Haley and De La Vina intersection during the bridge replacement construction. The bottom photo shows a much neater site with a completed bridge. However, this isn't by accident, is that we can complete this work. We carefully program our workload, and we use our P3s, measuring the efficiency of our performance. And also we use other professionals, our important tools, project management tools, to accelerate the work of minimizing inconveniences to the public. Here's a screenshot of the Engineering Division webpage. The hard hat icon notes the location of city projects that anyone can get detailed information about. We're looking for the update of our new website so we can even provide, hopefully, even better and more fluid work with the public. Some of the upcoming projects include the replacement of the Mason Street Bridge at Mission Creek. We're doing a significant amount of work on sewer rehabilitations, as I noted earlier, in collaboration with our wastewater group. Then also we're using grant funds for traffic signal upgrades and modernizations. Here's a copy of one of our public outreaches notices to the public. We try hard to follow the no surprises rule. This can be more than just informing the public of what we're doing. We work to involve the public and initiate a relationship with them so they understand what we're doing. As I noted earlier, some of our projects can create unavoidable inconveniences. For example, the Haley De La Vina Bridge. Another example recently has been the water line on Las Canoas Road. We had to work closely with the neighborhood because this is a major arterial through that part of town, and one of the key aspects of it is that the traffic had to be closed. And when you're the only arterial in and out of a mountain neighborhood, that can be quite disconcerting to many of the residents. However, I didn't receive one complaint and only a complimentary letter. So I hope you didn't. But this is just an example of the effort that we work on for our capital program. This is a photo of our pavement maintenance zone map. A key element of the city's infrastructure is the city's pavements, which consist of over 230 centerline miles and approximately 500 lane miles of paved surfaces. As the manager or the program manager of the Streets Capital Program, we work in close collaboration with our Transportation Streets and Facilities group, who's in charge of the traffic, some of the maintenance of the traffic signals and also streetlights. Much of this work, as far as planning out the contract maintenance, where we work by zones through the city, we also work closely with the city crews in the Public Works Streets Transportation. Keeping the city pavements in good shape can be a challenging task, and it has been especially in the last several years. There was a big article in the LA Times yesterday regarding the challenges that the city of LA has. So we're not the only city in California that has these challenges. Our pavement index is 63 out of 100 being a perfect, which is slightly below the condition of the statewide average of 66. Due to the limited available funding, we place a high priority on maintenance of those most highly traveled streets. The priority is reflected that for our arterials, our pavement condition index is 71 versus, as I noted earlier, on an average throughout is 63. Less maintenance is expected on the lower traveled residential streets due to the limited available funding as our strategy right now is that we're implementing. Current primitive maintenance strategies include patching and dig outs and, of course, in addition to the slurry seal. In fact, within a month or so, we're going to be coming to council with our annual slurry seal and pavement maintenance contracts. This graph tracks the amount of completed public works capital construction from 1988 to now. Even though it may have taken several years to complete any one project, this information sums up the total cost of a project, and it shows it in the year it was completed. For example, for this fiscal year, we are projected to go close to $80 million. $52 million of that is the airport terminal project. Of course, that's been going on for some time. In addition to this work is the maintenance and repair work that the city departments. So this doesn't reflect all the maintenance of the city's infrastructure. There's also the maintenance and repair work that other city departments, including Public Works Facilities, completes with the support of the city's purchasing division. Moving on to the Land Development and Real Property Program. That you can refer to page H352 through H354. Engineering Division staffs the front counter at 630 Garden for the department. Many times we are the public's first encounters of city government. As such, we know the importance of the city's land development team's motto, which is excellence in customer service. A key responsibility of this program is the management of the city's public right-of-way. Examples include the outdoor dining program and assuring safe construction of private development and the public utilities, let's say the Edison and Gas Company traffic control efforts. We also assure compliance with the California Subdivision Map Act for property transactions. Namely, our department stamps those maps that are recorded at the county recorder. Here's some photos of some examples of some of the encroachments within the public right-of-way that we work on in cooperation and collaboration with the adjacent property owners. Much of the city is outside the 1853 Haley survey grid, so there are locations, especially up in the Riviera, where the right-of-way is much wider than the traveled way. In this particular case, we work with the adjacent property owner to work out a mutual interest of beautification within However, it is within the public right-of-way, so in order to allow that, we have a formal process, the encroachment permit process, that allows us to move forward, and of course, work closely with our risk management to get the appropriate insurance forms. Finally, traffic engineering is the last operational program that we have in the engineering division, and please refer to page 360 and through 362 of the budget. This photo is our supervising traffic engineer, Derek Bailey, addressing a public forum in court that is part of a program that our transportation division is leading. He works in very close collaboration with the Streets Transportation Division. The photo on the right is kind of an interesting one. Is on Milpas Street, where one of our traffic techs is helping the police department enforce vehicular compliance of crosswalks, where cars are supposed to stop when there is a pedestrian in the crosswalk. As you can see, that didn't quite happen here. However, these collaborative efforts have been quite fruitful, and we found that in addition to the recent improvements that we've made on Milpas Street, there's been a higher attention of vehicular traffic to PEDs, and the compliance on Milpas has significantly increased regarding cars yielding to pedestrians in crosswalks. Finally, my last slide. This is a photo looking up Milpas Street at the recently installed improvements, which include the rapid flashing beacon improvements at Ortega that were developed by our traffic engineer and our engineering design group after significant community input. The beacons have become a good model for other locations in the city for improved pedestrian mobility. You may have seen several installed on Cabrillo, and then it's also turning into a concept that hopefully will be also successful on Salinas Street, which is of significant interest to the community on the east side. Traffic engineering staff also works to optimize traffic flow and responding to resident comments, which is a significant effort with regards to city traffic. And just to emphasize that one of the key points of the traffic engineering group is vehicular and pedestrian safety. And with that, I'd be very happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Kelly, can you update us on, at one point in the last couple of years, we talked about a GIS system or some kind of a tracking system that was going to be bought and developed by your department to keep us abreast of projects and permits and all those things that the public could access and see what was going to go on in the downtown?
Yes, we have implemented that. We call it Investa, and what it does, whenever anybody comes in for a public works permit, which is for any work within the public right-of-way, at our front counter, we track that in that program. We have yet to be able to link it into the city's website, we do have contact with our downtown organization to keep them informed of what we're doing. But yes, we haven't implemented that, and we're still working on scheduling that to make a presentation to the downtown org, hopefully within the next several months.
And would that include the permits pulled by public utilities as well? Yes. Thank you.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. So far, so good. I noticed that on one of the project objectives is to look at the feasibility of an internal service fund.
Yes.
And so so that's my first question. Can you tell me why that's a good idea or not? And then
What page are you looking at, just so we can...
H is in hotel. 348.
Thank you.
And then my second question is about the outdoor dining program. It said enforcement, like what kind of things are a violation? So those are my two questions, please.
Madam Mayor and Council Member Murillo, the Internal Service Fund is a item that we want to investigate. Is that right now the department, rather our program, our engineering services program, focuses on the capital program. And we fund ourselves by charging to the capital work that we complete. Like, for instance, the design administration, we essentially act as a internal engineering consulting firm, so much in the same way that an engineer, outside engineer, would bill against the capital project. We track very carefully our hours and our tasks and bill against those capital projects. So I'm doing this for many years, and what we're looking at is that at the end of the year, we are tasked to always make our projected revenues and not exceed our expenditures. And what we're looking at is to turn ourselves into an independent fund so that if there are any excessive, or not excessive, some overages on our revenues, that can go into account such that we can lower our overhead rate for services such as the administrative costs that aren't directly billable to the projects. Actually, my hours are not directly billed to any of the projects, so that what we can do is lower our overhead, and by lowering our overhead, we reduce the billings to the capital project, which provides lower costs for our capital program. And
Yeah, and I might just weigh in just briefly on that. It's a mechanism, and it's used in many other agencies similar to ours. In a way, it just creates a more visible and transparent understanding and allocation of funding involved in what we just discussed earlier is a general fund program, the way we're budgeted within the city budget, but the revenues are tracked and the expenditure side is captured somewhat differently than if we were to close it and make it a closed loop of an internal service fund with a rate structure and a capture of the expenditures associated with projects that you could see without the confusion of having a general fund and multiple department projects involved. So we're investigating it. If it looks like it's to the advantage of the city for us to take that step, that would be the reason to do it.
the second question was regarding the outdoor dining program. As you know, that's been quite a successful program for many years. And we manage it generally by periodic inspections. However, we also rely a lot on complaint basis. I have for example, umbrellas. There's the 6'8" Dave Johnson rule, is that all the umbrellas are supposed to, he was 6'8". He was the prior director. And all the umbrellas are supposed to clear 6'8". Well, we have to periodically go through and check and make sure the umbrellas are the correct height and make sure that they're not stuffing too many chairs within the area. But we do periodic sweeps, especially during the fiestas, during the public events, when there's a lot of demand and interest to use the outdoor dining, but generally by complaint.
Mr. House?
It's cool that you invoked Dave Johnson. That's great. Good memories. Three things quickly. If you go back to the slide that showed the chart of engineering services capital program, and the information I'm going to ask for may very well be readily available in the large document. Maybe you can point me to it. But the reason I'm going to ask this question is because as we look forward to our infrastructure needs, this is the one that showed the chart with the capital program, total project costs, and the over time by fiscal year. That one, exactly. Okay. So we know that the airport, for example, or the bridges downtown across Mission Creek, where the majority of the funding, some enormous amount, like 89% or something for the bridges, and a significant portion of the airport terminal were provided by grants or by other sources besides our local funding. And if I were to look forward to what we need to do to increase our local contribution to the effort to maintain our infrastructure, I need to know kind of what the baseline is. Recognizing that we're matching funds and we're able to achieve these grants because of our local portion. We're stepping up. We're a self-help organization, basically. So a chart like this one that would show what the City of Santa Barbara taxpayers were contributing each year over time would be helpful. And if I looked forward, then if we were to increase that and expect some concurrent increase in the other kinds of funding, then that would be, I don't know, I just think that would be really helpful. Now, information may very well be here, but and you can point us to it, but that would be a request.
Mayor Schneider and Councilmember House, is that in the last, I've started to include as part of the quarterly CIP presentations the amount of funds set aside that are for grants. That's a start.
Yes.
Is that more of the information you're interested, or even beyond that?
That's great, because you've heard me ask for, so the public and we can appreciate the value of your staff's work in achieving these grants. We've multiplied our local resource. This leveraging has been just very successful, and I was hopeful, and you've done a great job to begin to really show us the value of that work and that initiative. This is the next iteration of that, and it just occurred to me looking at this slide that if we're going to look forward to our deferred maintenance for capital programs, that what we really need to know is what we've been providing locally and what we're going to be asking voters, our, it's ratepayers or taxpayers, to do if they're going to step up to help us meet that challenge. So I need a baseline. We would need a baseline to start from.
I think that was something that we'd have to get together and work with the city administrator's office and work to develop that kind of data.
And part of it's in the 6-year CIP. When we provide that to you, I think we do a projection to the forward of local sources of revenue and then where we expect to get grants. And of course, we don't count grants until we receive them.
Right.
I mean, we could go backwards and look. What's difficult about a chart like this is that you don't get trends because of the way we complete projects. You complete the airport in 2013, of course, and then you get a big jump there. I think we can also probably show you trends, especially from the 6-year CIP, about where sources of funding come from. I think the local sources are pretty, we know what those are, and they're pretty consistent. It's those outside sources that are a result of applying for grants. With the airport, of course, it's with FAA funding. There's just so many ways that we finance capital projects. But and I know we're going to be talking with a finance committee probably, I think, in 2 weeks and deal with some of that, because I know Councilmember White has asked us to predict out.
I'm taking your admonishments really seriously, Mr. Armstrong, and that's the reason why I'm trying to see how we can get our minds around what it means to increase our local effort to do what you're showing us that we're going to need to do, and how to demonstrate that. Here it would be hard to see. It looks like we're kind of flush. We've got all this money, but that's because we had the local effort then was multiplied by the outside funding. We need to know what the local effort needs to increase to be able to step up. And I have 2 other real quick questions here. One, the training budget, the professional development side of the equation, it would seem like best practices, state-of-the-art, most efficient, I mean, the lighting changes we made in our parking structures that have saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and some of these other things, even the way people deal with issues of traffic and the interface with pedestrians. We need our staff to be right up on the leading edge of that stuff. And where's the training budget show up, and is it adequate to really accomplish what you need to do?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember House, is that I'm pleased to report we're finally able to get that moved up. During the budget challenges that we've had, like everybody else, we had to make a lot of trims. Now that we are moving in where we believe that we have a more robust work to do, we are now able to afford having a training budget that matches our needs. And so this past year is that I was able to get approved through the director and the city administrator, thank you very much, a program of training that matches more our needs. And
that's reflected in the current budget proposal?
Yes, it is. And thank you for mentioning that, because that's been something that, it's kind of an arm wrestle with the administrative to, you got to balance everything. And so we're finally able to balance things where I'm much happier.
Yeah, and I bet your staff is too. And the last question then, it's sort of related to that. your folks are the front end, the public interface at the counter, at least on the buildings side at 630 Garden Street. When Mr. Bailey goes out and meets with the public at a community meeting, he's the face of the city. When he comes here, his candor and his ability, same thing for all of your staff, really, ability to answer our questions in a way that seems like a fair broker. Everybody gets a chance to be heard. And then also you as well, when you're out in the community at downtown organization, answering questions. There's a customer service piece that's a key theme for you. It goes a little bit to the training side of it, keeping that customer service ability. You're great engineers. I'm not finding fault, but to maintain that effort, where does that show up in your budget?
Again, I'm happy to report that the time and funding set aside for training is matching our needs. And you've pointed out, one of the weaknesses of engineers, where we love getting in the weeds, but not everybody loves to be there with us. And so part of it is just training ourselves to push ourselves up and see the big picture. And we are able to spend more time being able to do that, so that as our project engineers and supervisors work through the organization, they'll have the skills necessary to make presentations to the public and here at the council.
Maybe not, if not now, at some point, maybe after this, you'd send us an email to showing us where that is really showing in the budget. I'd appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I think just to follow up a little bit on what Mr. House was saying on this graph, it would probably be easy to determine how much, for example, general fund money was used, because I think that's what we're talking about, local money, local funds, even beyond water, wastewater rates, but general fund money, and I think people will be pretty surprised at how small that number is, and I think that gets to Mr. House's point, because if we are looking at some point in the future of a new source of revenue, that's really the type of thing where it would go. It would be a bond or whatever it is, but a general fund new revenue. So that's the, and I think as it links to the infrastructure task force recommendations, I know their recommendation back in 2008 was that 10%, right, of the general fund should go towards capital and infrastructure. Yeah.
And if you look at this chart, the general fund portion for that period probably maxed out maybe at $2 or $3 million, when for a couple of years in the last probably 5 years it's been $1 million or less.
Right.
So just to meet with
So
that.
2013, you're closing in on 80 million, and it was $1 million or less of that was general fund money.
That's correct.
That tells a story, and you don't see that from this graph, and I think that's what Mr. House is getting at here. I have a couple of questions. First, on page H377, there's a big difference. This is on streets capital, between the amended 2013 budget and the projected. Intergovernmental went from 16.8 million to 3, and then capital programs for streets went from 20.6 million down to 7. Was there money that we thought we were going to get that we didn't? What happened?
I think in general, looking at page H377, when you're looking at the capital charts, it's challenging because we have carryovers from year to year, and we also have funding that is tied to grants and when we receive them. So I apologize. Was there a specific line item that I missed that you were asking?
Yeah, it's under intergovernmental on page H377.
Right.
The amended FY13 is 16.8 million, but the projected for this year is only 3.3 million, or 3 million. And then it even goes down to 344,000 for 14 and 15. So it's not like that money's being carried over into the future.
No, but those are grants, and once again, those can vary from year to year. And
So did we not get $13 million worth of grants this year? Because it went from 16.8 million down to 3 million for this year.
And those were probably bridges related to bridge funding, and it's a timing issue of when bridges come up and the grant is approved. So
is then the reason why we're not seeing that money carried over into the future is because we don't know when the grant's coming? I mean, what? Yeah, there you go. Get Michelle up here. It's all streets capital, so it's under the streets capital program, not bridges. So
correct, but that's also where the bridge funding
Okay.
would show up.
okay.
Madam Mayor, Michelle DeCamp from Public Works. on that particular line item and the way it shows in the budget does look confusing. When you look at the actual, and you're looking at the revenue line item, so you're looking at where it starts at 5 million, it goes up to 16 million?
No.
Which one?
I'm looking on page H377.
Oh, down on the expenditures.
I'm looking at both. I'm looking at, yeah.
Okay, but either way, the actual, whether it's a revenue or expenditure, is the actual revenue we received. And when you're looking at intergovernmental, it's usually the FHWA grants, which we apply as, on a quarterly or 6 months basis for our eligible costs, and then we get reimbursed. But when we come to council and we, in a couple of weeks, we're coming to appropriate $2.1 million of FHWA grants, we don't necessarily have that, but it hits the books. The amended column are all of those changes that happen throughout the year, as well as carryovers. So we may not have spent that money yet, but it gets carried over from year to year. And that's why the amended looks so big.
No, the amended is small.
On which
I'm sorry,
number?
the actual, I'm going from amended to projected.
Right. I'm sorry, I amended 13. And then when you go into projected or proposed,
Yeah.
that's the actual of, as of this moment, what we're budgeting.
Okay.
So when you look on the revenue side, the 344,000 is strictly one up above.
For FY14, correct, 344,000.
That is strictly one grant that we know we receive, and we receive it every year.
Okay. So,
And on the expenditure side, that is more of our streets money that's going directly to capital for capital projects, meaning some of the UUT and the gas tax money. That's actually budgeted and real.
okay, so so if you look at the expenditures, the amended 13 was $20 million, $20.6 million.
Right.
The projected is only $7 million.
Right.
Moving forward, you're only looking at 3.5 and 2.6 million.
Exactly. And
What
we're-
happened to the other 13 million?
We're going to carry that forward to fiscal year 14.
But it's not shown on here because why?
It's not budgeted. It's a carryover. And it's the way that the finance department prepares this budget document.
Okay, but it looks like we lost $13 million somehow.
But we won't.
I know
Yeah.
that, but on this piece of paper, it's like, where'd the money go? And you're saying, well, it's here, but it's not on paper. So if it's not on paper, where did it go? And if it's in a sock somewhere, then we need to know where the sock is. You know what I mean? So it's confusing, I think, in terms of the general public looking at this as well.
The capital budget is a challenge, more than any other part of the operating budget, for sure. And you will see that amount that does get carried over when you see the amended amount for fiscal year 14, for example. When we adopt the budget, it'll be one number. When it's amended, it'll capture those carryovers. So we don't lose the money, but it is a challenge to allocate without looking like we've got more money than we have. For example, if we put 13 million in fiscal year 13 amended, and then we put it in again in 14, you'd be confused about, does that mean 23 million? No. We try to have each of the fiscal years be actual to that moment in time,
Okay.
but it may be carried forward.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Kelly, you mentioned that LA Times article over the weekend, and that article also listed a website anyone could go to look at a particular street and see what the condition of whether A through F, and I think it also showed if there's, what's the schedule for maintenance of that street. Do we have anything like that? Is that something that I know we have a schedule of when sidewalks and streets are to be repaired or slurry sealed, but is that accessible on the website at all, or?
Madam Mayor and Council, we have some of that, but not all of it. For example, here is the priority roads and our zone maintenance map. And what we have is 6 zones that we work through the city. There are approximately the same number of roadway miles is how we've divided it up. And we generally go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. As far as, and so by knowing, for example, we're in zone 6 this coming year, so, because we just done a significant work in zone 1. So, so we're,
Well, my
prior
point
zone.
is,
So we're
if I
going through the
lived
city.
on, East Valerio and Garden, I'm going to just pick an intersection.
Right.
And I want to know when's the next time that street's going to be scheduled to be slurry sealed. I don't know what zones are. I don't know what came first or second. I just want to know outside my street, when's the next time that's going to be scheduled to get some form of repair. Can I go on a website and find that out?
No.
Okay. And is there any, and do I, and if I even want to know what we consider the status of that road to be, whether it's A through F, can I go on the website and find that out?
We do not have that interactive capability at this time. We have that information in our database, and that's part of some of the discussions we're having internally as to whether not to put that on the new website or not. But
Okay.
right now, that's a call to the staff, because generally, there's no simple answer regarding these types of situations, especially when we are so challenged with the budget, is that if we had a robust budget, we could probably predict much better as to what we're going to do from year to year. Because we do not have a robust budget, then we're constantly changing alternatives and priorities to maximize the funding that we have. So the best way for any resident to find that out is really to call the engineering staff, and we can give you our best estimate as to when we can do that work.
Okay. It just seems like we have all that information. Why not share it? You know, I mean, why? No one. I mean, people not necessarily going to want to call City Hall, but they'll surf through a website to say, you know, and even if there's no hope of something happening in the next couple of years, just saying it's not funded, or what the schedule is of each of the zones, or something. If we have it, you know, why not?
Yeah,
Share it.
we do have the information, and we can put it, because we just shared it with a citizen this morning, of how we value their street. I think the challenge is that we have 6 maintenance areas that we go, every year we go through those, but each year then we decide a year or so in advance, what are we going to do in that area based upon the limited resources. So in Zone 1, if we're going to get there 3 years from now, we're not going to do every street in Zone
Correct.
1. So then they're going to have to do an assessment and say, okay, we have so much money in the pot, we're going to be able to slurry seal this much and do a certain amount. So it's hard to then tell a resident 3 years from now, we're going to slurry seal your street, because we may not.
But they would know what year Zone 1 was scheduled, and if they wanted to, during that budget season, to highlight certain roads, they could.
And
You
we
know,
can,
if there's a way
we can
to,
put that available.
something like that.
Yeah,
I don't know, it just seems like more information like that. Road stuff, potholes become a big deal. Finally, I just want to mention out loud to my colleagues and to staff about street repair. Last month at the SB-CAG, we had a board retreat in the afternoon, and one idea came out of that. SB-CAG staff's going to come back to the SB-CAG board at the June meeting. We were talking about Measure A and the strategic plan for Measure A, and should we do any changes to the strategic plan, which would require a 2/3 vote of the board. And one idea that came out was, should we bond some money today that's already scheduled over the 30-year life period of Measure A for street and road repair countywide? Should we bond for some of that now in order to get an influx of money now to repair some of those streets, because it would cost a lot less to repair those streets now than waiting 20 years for that same street? Because it might, as we've had many, Johnny Wozniak and others give us that explanation of how the exponential rise in cost if the street gets to such a state of disrepair. So I think the ballpark money that was talked about countywide was somewhere in the realm of $45 million. And if you look at the city of Santa Barbara on a population basis, roughly that could mean about 1/3 of that. And that's $15 million. That's a good chunk of change. Now, granted, that means in the out years of Measure A, that money's no longer there for street repair, but then that's the cost-benefit analysis of seeing, do we want a chunk of change now to do some major, slurry seal the whole city or something like that, to extend the life of the streets. And every city rep and every county supervisor on the board, everyone said, this is something we really need to look at, because I think we're even better off than a lot of the other cities and the county for sure in terms of their state of road repair. And there was a report about that recently. So everyone's talking about that. So that analysis is going to come back to the SB-CAG board at their June meeting with direction from the board, perhaps working with TTAC and so forth, if we do want to move forward with a amendment to the strategic plan. Probably won't happen until the fall, but it may be something. I know I know Browning Allen and Rob Dayton always, goes to those meetings, but it may be something we as a city may want to pay a little more attention to as the policy discussion is happening, because, in the next few years, if that's possible, that's a significant way of bringing in a new source, well, really a source of revenue we're already paying for, but bonding for, something that's already in existence through Measure A. And it's the section that's already there for street repair wouldn't be taking away from safe routes to school or the 101 freeway or something like that. So it seemed to make a lot of sense at the meeting anyway. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. Anything else on this section? Okay, thank you very much.
Now I'd like to introduce Gary Horwald to go over a brief presentation of the fleet program and highlight any of the changes that we foresee for fiscal year 14. Get back on track.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. Let's see. Okay. This is your fleet management team. There's 15 full-time employees in fleet management. And the city's fleet consists of a wide variety of about 486 vehicles and equipment with a replacement value of about $36 million. And our mission is to provide safe and reliable transportation for all the city departments in the city, and maximize the availability of the vehicles so that they're on the road while preserving the capital value. This is a shot of, on the left, of our technician connecting to the onboard computer in a police patrol unit, and two of our technicians on the right maintaining a fire truck. And we maintain the fleet with a balance of in-house staff and contractual support. And this is an example body work of work that is primarily done with contractual support. A key area of our responsibility is to plan for the replacement of the city's fleet and to manage the city's replacement fund for replacing the vehicles. And some of the strategies that we've been using over the past several years is to defer the replacement of some of these vehicles and extend the life cycles. And we also expanded the pool vehicle program to include some of the trucks in the Public Works fleet. And so in 2014 and 15, you're going to be seeing a few more replacements than you've seen in the past few years. But the replacement fund, as a result of these strategies, is in balance going forward. You may remember over a year ago, Ford was discontinuing the Crown Victoria Patrol Unit, which is a major event for us because this has been the standard police car for almost 20 years now for the police department. And the equipment that we use to outfit these vehicles is reused over and over again as the vehicles are replaced. It's transferred from one vehicle to the other. And so we made a strategic move to pre-purchase some of these Crown Victorias when they were being discontinued, and to allow us some time to be able to evaluate what the options are going to be going forward. And we were able to do that by getting an agreement with Ford to begin the warranty start date when the vehicles go into service, not when they were purchased, so that we didn't lose any of our warranty time period. So we're now at the end of that program, and we've established a vehicle selection committee partnership between fleet and police, evaluating the replacement options that are available out there. And now they've had some time to have those vehicles on the road. We can talk with other agencies and see how they're performing. And in 2014, we'll be purchasing and equipping our first of our new generation of police cars. Fleet management is responsible for the refueling infrastructure throughout the city, and there's a need to remove the tanks from in-ground at the city's main refueling site at the corporate yard. And this is a picture. There's a capital plan that is part of the budget to build a new fuel site. This is at the annex yard across from El Estero. and with above-ground fuel tanks. And you can see that on page H382 in your budget document. It's actually in as part of our operating budget at the moment. And it's going to be financed with fuel per gallon surcharges to pay for this project. This picture is an example of two of our newest alternative fuel vehicles. They're zero-emission electric vehicles, and they were purchased using partially state and federal incentive money to help offset the cost of these vehicles. We recently conducted a ride and drive event in the city to help promote the use of the alternative fuel vehicles and show people how to use these. And by the way, these vehicles are part of the pool program. They're charged in the Public Works corporate yard. And as you know, that's supplied with solar energy to generate electricity there.
So you're riding on sunshine.
We're riding on sunshine, essentially.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to ask a question about the funding of the fuel system. You said that this will be paid for by a surcharge on fuel. Where does the money come from? Are you sort of just using capital now, and then we'll pay back the capital with that per gallon fee? Is that the idea? Rather than borrowing the money is what I'm heading toward.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, the money is, the capital funds are going to be borrowed from the fleet replacement reserves and repaid back to the reserves.
So internally financed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. House?
Your last slides are kind of fun to think about in terms of the fleet that we use for the staff. And I guess you changed over a couple years ago or sometime to the way you allocate the resource of the vehicles, because they're the key system or something, so that you get more use out of each vehicle. And that, coupled with the ones that use very little gasoline, it seems like there would be a multiplier effect there. Have you considered? Are you prepared, or is it showing somewhere how much you're able to save by switching over to these kinds of vehicles for the use of our staff to go to, different events and for the normal transportation?
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Mr. House. To quantify that is, yes, I have done that. I don't have those figures with me, but essentially what's been done is the vehicles have been moved into a shared position through the use of this vehicle pool instead of being assigned to one person or one section.
Right.
And so they're more fully utilized. And what that's allowed us to do is to reduce the number of vehicles that we need to have on hand to support staff's various functions. Okay. And so the cost savings is essentially the lack of maintenance, that you've got less vehicles, you're doing less maintenance, and the capital cost of the vehicles. And then as well, part of that is we've been moving from some of the older vehicles that we've had that are less fuel efficient and so forth to vehicles such as this, hybrids, electric vehicles that are more fuel efficient.
I mean, I don't have the most current Prius, but I mean, it's just really remarkable how little I pay to operate it. Even the maintenance of it, when I go in for a tune-up, it's just like, last time I went, it was like $89, and there's people who are out there who bring their Volvo or some other something, and they're paying $300 or $400 for just the most basic stuff. And I've just been very surprised at how low maintenance it is. And I'm guessing that you're choosing these vehicles for the same purposes. Am I right about that?
Yes. Yeah, the cost to maintain them actually is the electric vehicles are a little bit different, but for the Prius and some of those, the cost to maintain them is similar to what the conventional vehicles are, depending on the type of use that you do. But as vehicles, the newer vehicles, as you get newer vehicles, the quality has been improving quite a bit, and the cost of maintenance is going down.
Okay, great. And so we can celebrate that success. It would seem like you're justifying those movements to that kind of thing. It's intuitive, but it would be great to be able to see how you to quantify that, I guess, is my point. okay? And maybe next time we do a budget presentation on the amendment for next year or something, it'd be really good to hear how you're able to show the actual cost-benefit ratio of making these moves. Thank you.
Okay.
If I remember from a sustainability committee meeting, and that's going to be in the upcoming report, our fleet is smaller by 8, right? You did not have to purchase 8 vehicles that normally you would have under the old process.
Actually, it's now administrative vehicles, it's 14. 14 vehicles, and we've also are now 2 of the larger trucks in Public Works. As I stated, we started a pool for those as well, and we've been able to reduce that count of vehicles by 2 of the
So
larger
the
trucks
capital
as well.
savings of 8 vehicles and 2 Public Works.
14.
14, and then 2 of the bigger trucks is
Right.
approximately how much?
The 2 trucks are probably about $380,000 is the capital cost. And the 14 vehicles, boy, I can't remember off the top of my head. It's in the high 200s.
Right. Okay, so over 500, close to $600,000 saved.
That should get pretty close.
Yeah, okay. That's a good number.
Yeah.
So,
You're so modest and understated. I mean, the thing, it's just unbelievable. Just really appreciate what you do. And we really need to find some better way to celebrate this.
yeah. No, it's just
So I'm very proud of that. But it's something that we've been talking about for a long time, and I don't want to come back here and keep talking about the same thing and showing the same thing.
Oh,
So-
always tell us how much money you've saved. That's
Okay.
always a good thing, so, through your efficiency. So thank you very much.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions on this item? No. Thank you. I think Mr. Dewey's next.
Now, I'd like to introduce Jim Dewey to provide a report on the Facilities and Energy Management Division.
Good afternoon, Mayor Schneider and council members. I'm here to present an overview of the Facilities and Energy Management Division. First of all, our division has 7 programs: building maintenance, traffic signals, energy conservation, environmental compliance, communications, and custodial services. And this year we have a new program, Facilities Capital. Altogether, we have 37.9 full-time employees and a budget of $7.7 million in our annual budget. And what we do is we provide diverse services to other city departments. And the little B up there is the logo for the Building Users Group that we just formed in the last year. So that's our BUG group. And so they meet with facility staff, all the people who are interested in buildings, and we discuss plans for the buildings and allocated charges. So in a nutshell, this is what we do. We maintain and clean general fund buildings and provide for their renewal. We manage the environmental compliance in the public right-of-way. We manage the renewable energy generation and energy and efficiency programs for the city. We provide for all the maintenance of communications, our electronic systems throughout the city, and maintain street lights and traffic signals. One of our main sections is our building maintenance section, and we maintain all of the city general fund buildings, and we respond to service calls from all the departments. And we operate like a general contractor, so we'll also provide for-fee services to enterprise funds and for special projects for the general fund in areas like if somebody needs a remodel or welding fabrication, electrical, mechanical, and plumbing modifications, we can provide all those with a similar price structure as a general contracting agency. And we also maintain over the 2,500 city streetlights. So we maintain over 300 city structures, both large and small. And all of our facilities are heavily used. And even simple buildings like this one, a restroom, has expensive systems like Spanish-style roofs that need to be replaced periodically. So all these things really, they get a lot of wear and tear, and they cost a lot of money to replace. So we also maintain all sorts of other systems like outdoor lighting systems in parks, sports lighting. We maintain all the parking lots and public pool infrastructure and things like that. So this is just an overview of the rest of our of what we do in the different sections at Facilities and Energy Management. Our custodians provide cleaning for the 30 largest buildings in the city. Our electronic maintenance staff maintain over 100 signalized intersections in the city and the telephone and radio systems. Our energy management section is now saving over $447,000 annually due to energy conservation and electrical rate restructuring. Our environmental compliance section provides the cleanup of hazardous materials and contaminated sites in the public right-of-way, and also provides for the vector control. I want to focus on our new program this year, our Facilities Capital Program. This provides for the funding of capital maintenance projects for the city general fund buildings. So previously, this funding was part of the building maintenance program. And so creating this new program provides a clear reporting mechanism on the need for capital maintenance and identifies its cost and funding, and provides a long-term project plan in coordination with other departments' capital improvement programs. That wasn't really completely transparent before this year, so we're kind of glad to pull that out separately to really identify what the backlog of capital maintenance looks like.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could you differentiate between capital maintenance and maintenance?
Capital maintenance is any large capital improvement that needs to happen in a building. So maintenance would be something that would be more routine, more ongoing, something that is a smaller job. And capital maintenance would be, usually it involves something that extends the life of the building. And it also, we set dollar thresholds around that. So let's say, an item that's over $100,000 would definitely be a capital item just because of the cost.
Okay, thank you.
So here's a list of some of the projects that we have slated for fiscal year 14. And the importance here is really identifying the projects and the substantial costs with maintaining our facilities. So this provides better communication to the public and city staff as to the actual cost of keeping all of our building assets running properly. This is a pie chart of the 485,000 square feet of general fund building space that we have. As you can see, a large part of that is parks and recreation buildings. But the thing to remember here is that there's a lot of square footage, and all of these facilities are heavily used by the public. This chart shows a histogram of our building square footage built by year. And the takeaway here is that 60% of our total square footage is over 50 years old. So we have a lot of buildings that are aging and are in need of major renewal. So in the past, the redevelopment agency has been a major source of funding for capital renewal. And they funded projects like Fire Station 1 renewal and the Korea Recreation Center. And with the disbanding of RDA, we really have lost that funding. So we need to find another funding mechanism to address the issue of deferred maintenance or capital maintenance that needs to be done within our buildings. So we estimate currently that we have a backlog of about $218 million in capital maintenance in our buildings. And a typical commercial building usually needs major renewal every 50 years. And whenever you have a major renewal project, it also triggers other things like code enforcement and upgrades that need to happen, things like ADA compliance, seismic upgrades, fire upgrades, which also adds to the cost. Another thing that we're looking at, our annual funding has been increasing for capital maintenance, but we still have an annual funding deficit. And because of that, our capital maintenance backlog is growing. So we have an annual deficit of about $2.1 million. In other words, we need another $1.2 million in order to fully fund the capital maintenance program on an annual basis. So our city has a lot of wonderful and heavily used facilities, and the community has supported the building of these facilities in the past and continues to enjoy their benefit. With each facility, there's a need for renewal, and right now there's no endowment to fund this. If the community wants to continue using these facilities, further investment needs to be made. And one of our most prized facilities is the Cabrillo Pavilion Arts Center down on East Beach, and a really good example of a facility that's heavily used. And there's no way that you can site a building like that down in a beach location now. I mean, the building's priceless. And so it's just another opportunity. And now I'd like to answer any questions you might have.
Just back on that last slide, and this may be a question for the Parks and Rec department budget, but when the rental revenue goes into the Parks and Rec operations, right? There's no section for rental revenue to create some sort of capital endowment, or has that ever been talked about? I mean, thinking of like the Carrillo Rec Center, which we've rehabbed, but for ongoing maintenance.
Yeah, right now, the revenue that the Parks and Rec Department receives from Cabrillo, the Cabrillo Arts Center, goes into their operating budget. Now, a portion of that then is paid out to facilities maintenance for some of the repairs, but it's obviously not enough for especially this kind of capital renewal.
And it's one lump sum for all the rental revenues. It goes into overhead, which goes to Public Works to figure out something related to, right? It's not like I spent $500 renting a space and, $50 of that is going towards renovation of that space.
That's correct. It goes into the Parks and Rec budget, and then they're assessed a fee by Mr. Dewey for that facility, but it's primarily for the ongoing maintenance.
Ongoing maintenance, not capital maintenance. Right. Okay, thank you.
One thing I wanted to add, if you look on page E22 of your budget, you'll see the new, what we call Facilities Capital Fund, and as Mr. Dewey mentioned, the goal here is to better identify how he's spending those capital money on renewal and actually predict out for 5 to 6 years how those funds will be spent. So that it used to be just built into his operating budget, and so they've spent a lot of time planning out for the next 5 or 6 years on how they'll spend those scarce funds.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dewey. Can you describe the library security gates project, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Murillo. The security gate is, right now there's a partition between the main library and the Faulkner Gallery and the area that you walk into, the library entrance. And it's really just a security gate. And the gate right now it recedes into, it's like a large pocket door. And it isn't working very well. It rides on a track, and the track is worn out. So what we're going to do is replace that security gate with something more that you would see in a mall. It's kind of a aluminum accordion style gate that will pull out in the same pocket that the existing gate's in now.
So it's inside, okay.
Yeah, it's inside, so it's not an external type of thing. It's just to keep people that, if there's an event happening at the Faulkner Gallery after hours, they won't be able to wander into the main library.
And then is your department doing is it soil remediation at the police department headquarters?
Yes, and so that's part of environmental compliance. There was a leaking underground fuel tank at the police department, and there's money budgeted for that, I believe, to begin next year for the remediation of the site.
So that didn't have to do with the firing range?
No, the firing range, this is all, petrochemical issues. The firing range has to do with lead.
Okay, so there was a gas tank outside, a fuel tank?
Yeah, so they had a refueling station
Oh, okay.
outside of the police station for years.
Oh.
And it had an underground fuel tank, and that fuel tank had leaked at some point.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Dewey? Nope, thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce Browning Allen to walk you through the Transportation Division key highlights.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So this is the Transportation Division. In the division, we have the downtown parking program, streets maintenance, which includes street sweeping and the drainage system maintenance, transportation planning, which is the access and parking and development review, as well as transit assistance. Backing up in the Transportation Division, we have 64 full-time employees. In the downtown parking program, we operate and maintain all the city parking lots in the downtown core that are paid. We are open 360 days a year. We have roughly 3,300 parking spaces. We provide parking in 5 parking structures, 7 surface lots. In addition, we have the 2 commuter lots, the one at Coda Street and the one at Carrillo, as well as the recently completed parking lot on Helena Street. The parking staff also manages the contract that we have with New Beginnings for the Safe RV Parking Program, where we have individuals who can park their RVs in the Coda lot and the Carrillo lot, as well as parking lots of churches and nonprofit organizations. And then we oversee the contract we have with the bike station, and then we provide support to our downtown parking committee. Some of the projects we have projected for next fiscal year, and hopefully we can accomplish all of them, but a priority project that we're going to be working on is improving access over at Lot 5. The new Ensemble Theater is off the screen. We know when that theater comes online in Lot 5, we're going to see impact in terms of the circulation and vehicles being able to exit. So what we're proposing doing is converting the current entrance off of Victoria Street into an exit. It's currently operating that way right now with the temporary configuration of the lot during construction of the theater, and we want to make that a permanent solution. We also put money in the capital improvement program budget, and at the other half of the REA building, Greyhound is in the part of the building closest to State Street. The back half, closer to where the long-term parking is vacant right now. We know if we were to try and rent that out and get a tenant in there, there's going to have to be some tenant improvements. So we put a modest amount of money in there to assist with any type of tenant improvements. And then we are looking at improving control at the Coda commuter lot. We issue hang tags to put in the windshield for vehicles who are parking in there. Police department does parking enforcement. We're evaluating whether we want to put some type of rhythm control system in there where we can have better control, make sure the people who are parking there actually have paid to park in that parking lot. That's something that we're looking at.
Madam Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Ellen. Do I understand that the Coda commuter lot project is $400,000? I think I saw that somewhere.
That is what we have in the budget. It has not been fully designed. We have a conceptual that's been put together, and the major cost of that is for the revenue control equipment. That's the biggest number. So in fact, I have a meeting with downtown parking staff, I believe next week, just to sit down and look at the cost analysis and cost benefit, see what our return is going to be on doing this. But it's part of it is to make it a little easier to manage that lot and make sure we have an ability to control who's using the lot and freeing up some of the staff person's time that's tracking this down so they can do other things in the downtown parking program.
Well, is it a huge problem that we're trying to fix? It seems like a lot of money. Yeah, and I mean, then would it bring in new revenue? That's what you're talking about, right? Analyzing cost benefit.
It will bring in revenue that we're currently losing by people who are not paying, who have expired tags that have not paid. And we will also be setting it up for future use if the parking committee were to recommend to the council that sometime in the future we want to start charging the evening hours in that lot, we would have the ability to do that as well. right now, people can park in the Coto commuter lot after 5 p.m. for free and go.
Will that continue? I know people really rely on that.
We plan on keeping it that way right now. That's something that would, sometime in the future, if we have a need for additional paid parking in the downtown area, because Lot 10 and Lot 11 are always full, and that's something that we can consider. But as it is right now, we are not looking at charging people to pay after hours in the Coto lot.
So you're saying that even though the parking enforcement officers patrol and give tickets, people still park there, like, you mean like during the day?
That's correct. So they put their parking pass in the windshield. So the enforcement officers are driving up and down the aisles and to see if they have a tag. To actually see if the tag has expired, they're going to have to get out of the vehicle and go physically look at the tag. So sometimes they do it, many times they don't do it. They're on their run, so they go through there as they're doing the enforcement in the downtown core.
Okay. It just, to me, $400,000 caught my eye. So
It is
I'd
right.
be interested to hear more about why we're
absolutely.
doing that. Yeah.
Moving on to the street maintenance program.
Before we got off of parking, Mr. Allen, if you look in the budget and you see the FY012 versus and the outline years, and in revenue you have transfers in, which you have $310,000 in FY12, and then it's blank in the following years, but the transfers out remains the same. Can you clarify that for us?
The transfers in, I believe, was the rebate we received for workers' comp. But the transfer out is the money that we transfer out to pay the DO maintenance contract.
So what's the revenue source then for that in the future?
Coming out of downtown parking fees.
So that's an extraordinary expense. It doesn't, because I know that at one point in time you had a backfill from the RDA funds as well.
Yeah, when the council first brought this into play in the downtown parking program, we received the first year $197,000 RDA funds, then it dropped down to $119,000 RDA funds. That went away with the dissolution of the redevelopment agencies, and that was the past 2 fiscal years we have not received those funds.
So in your outline CIP, if you're trying to build reserves or trying to build capital for CIP, it's going to be difficult with those kind of pressures in your revenues. Is that fair to say? Or?
Well, that 350 we definitely could use for other capital needs, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Moving into this area of streets, so one of the programs that we started in 2002 was, as a pilot, was the residential street sweeping program on the west side. We fully implement the city in 2008. Annually, we sweep just over 17,000 curb miles. We do not sweep on the major city holidays, and we also do not sweep when water is flowing in the gutters. So like this morning, if our staff went out and they saw water flowing in the gutter because it rained, even though it's not raining this afternoon, we cancel street sweeping. So we have to tell our residents, they call in, if you go outside and you know it's a street sweeping day and you see water flowing in the gutter and it's raining, it's not because somebody had their sprinkler on, it's running in the street, we'll cancel street sweeping that day. And we have consistent.
So I understand. And is that because it's not effective if there's water in the gutter?
That is correct, because what we wind up doing is just sucking up mostly water and not debris.
Thank you.
He said, we'll just fill up the tank with water, and it's not effective. Well, the operator spend most of his time dumping out the water and not picking up the debris. So it's not cost effective to do on a rainy day. We have consistently picked up just under 3.7 million pounds of debris on an annual basis. The street staff monitors that on an annual basis, and we haven't not seen that number of debris fluctuate hardly at all since we began the program and did the fully implementation of the entire city. This is a map that just shows the tires.
Madam Mayor, if I could, is that compostable, that material?
Most of it, a lot of it is. We do. When we take it back to the yard, it's spread in the yard, and some of the plastics and that stuff is picked out. But a lot of it is dirt and leaves, and it's compostable.
And do we disseminate that or give it away, or what do we do?
Marburg comes over and picks up the
Sorry?
Marburg comes over and picks up the debris for us. So here's a map of the entire city. The west side and the east side, we sweep that weekly. We alternating the sides of the street on different days. And most of the other areas we are sweeping every other week. And the only areas that we have parking enforcement are on the east side and the west side and part of the upper east side, primarily the green areas here. We're sweeping 80% of the city streets. The areas that we are not sweeping are up in the hilly area, the Riviera area, because of the narrowness of the streets, the winding of the street, and it's just not safe for our operator to be out there sweeping these streets. You have a street sweeper traveling down the road about 7, 8 miles an hour on a windy road. Cars aren't expecting to see that. So if we have a need to go up there, we'll do a special sweep using our own sweeper, but for the most part, we don't sweep those areas. In the drainage and transportation maintenance area, we do pavement, concrete repair, striping. We have a crew that does the curb painting, paints all the crosswalks, the stop legends. We also do graffiti removal and sign replacement. So we have a crew, our asphalt crew, that can do overlay. We do minor work. We also work with the engineering group if they're going to go and do a slurry, so we may go in and do a skim coat before they come in and do the slurry program. We have a concrete crew that we do some concrete work. We do about 10,000 square feet of concrete by our crews, another roughly 30 to 40,000 square feet by contract on an annual basis. We try and hit the urgent stuff with our crews, and then the contract stuff, we put that out on an annual basis. In our sign crew, all the various regulatory signs that we must maintain. We have a number of signs that are stolen on an annual basis. In any given month, we're probably missing roughly 100 street name signs primarily. We also take care of our
Madam Mayor. Mr. Allen, may I ask about graffiti removal? Because I noticed in the budget part that the costs have gone down. So it looked like in 2012, we were budgeted for $316,000 and projected for 2013, $275,000. So does that mean that there's less graffiti to be removed?
Let's see where. Can you send me to a page that you're looking at?
H370. Please. It's transportation and drainage systems maintenance.
You're talking about the square footage of graffiti removal.
Oh, shoot, that's right. It wasn't money. It was square footage. Yeah, thanks.
It fluctuates up and down. I can tell you we have a full-time employee and an hourly employee. They are kept busy on a daily basis, but it fluctuates from time to time. And we have our areas where we know we're going to hit it. Sometimes we might go back to the same area and it's a small amount of graffiti we're removing, but we're out there on a regular basis. And hopefully some of our quick response to removal of graffiti is a deterrent for people coming in and tagging in areas as well.
Mr. Allen, could you just, for the benefit of the public, talk through how graffiti removal works and what they can do if they spot graffiti and can't get it and remove it themselves?
If they spot graffiti, don't expect it to be taken care of without calling it in. There's some areas where we know to expect graffiti and we'll go up and check it on a daily basis. But if they see graffiti, we ask that they call it in. We have a graffiti hotline. So call Public Works, and our staff listens to the message on a daily basis, and we schedule it and we go out and take care of it. Our goal is to get the graffiti out as soon as possible. By ordinance, we must remove it within 72 hours, but we usually get it done within 24 to 48 hours unless it's on a weekend. We also require private property owners to remove graffiti within 72 hours. So if a person calls in, graffiti is located at such and such address, and it turns out to be on private property, we'll make contact with the owner of that property and tell them we found graffiti, please remove it. You got 3 days to take care of it. And for the most part, we see pretty much 99% compliance. Sometimes it might take longer because the property owner might reside outside the area, so they have to make arrangements to get somebody to come in and take care of it. We have not had to invoke all the provisions of the ordinance where we could have a hearing before the Public Works Director and then do the work and then assess them on their property tax bill. So we do find compliance. Some of them take a little bit longer than we'd expect, but overall we have really good compliance for graffiti removal.
Do you want to give out that phone number people can call? I got it right in front of me. Just 896. Because I call it all the time. No, I call it all the time, really. 897-2513. That's 897-2513. Thank you.
Yeah, we ask the same thing. If any condition they see out in the street, whether it be an uplifted sidewalk, pothole, missing street sign, or graffiti, call Public Works and we'll take care of it, fairly quickly. We also take care of emergency response. This is the top picture is looks like a water main break. Crews went out and responded along with the water division to address that problem. The lower prop, we see a slide for one of our rainy events. We do the cleanup on the Union Pacific Railway corridor. James Russell is one of our street maintenance supervisors. He's out there this week. He began his work with the UP. He's going to be out there the entire month of May and maybe into June, taking care of the right-of-way. And Union Pacific reimbursed us for our cost for hiring the California Conservation crew to do that work. And they also pay us to paint out graffiti on their right-of-way as well. And then we take care of various special events. This picture here is when we work with the fire department to close the street for the hanging of the trees, the Christmas lights on the tree over by the Rouse. We also provide barricades for Fiesta Solstice on July 4th, the State Street Mile, and some other city-sponsored special events. Moving into transportation planning, land development program. So we're a member of the land development team along with the engineering group. One thing that I want to point out to the council as part of the general plan update, we are proposing a couple of land development fees. It's going to be discussed tomorrow at the Council Finance Committee. One is a project-specific impact analysis fee. So if we have a project that determined to have a project-specific impact, we're going to use the traffic model that was developed through the Plan Santa Barbara. And the other is a fee based on the unit size, single-family, multifamily, non-residential, where we need to start collecting money over time to pay to update the baseline, basically update the models. And we estimate that will cost about $45,000. The model is going to be, the baseline is going to be good for a number of years. We figure annual revenue of about $8,000. And we're not looking at full cost recovery. We recover about 90% of our costs for that. So more to come on that tomorrow. Rob Dayton and Steve Foley will be at the Finance Committee tomorrow. We participate in regional transportation planning efforts through Santa Barbara County Association of Governments. I currently serve as the chairperson of the Technical Transportation Advisory Committee, as well as the Joint Transportation Advisory Committee working with the planners on the SB 375, the greenhouse gas program as well. So Rob Dayton is actively involved with the 101 HOV lane project. He's a member of the project development team with the county and Caltrans and SBCAG. And then we provide support to our Transportation and Circulation Committee. In the area of transit assistance, we provide a contract, have a contract with the Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District for the downtown waterfront shuttle, as well as Easy Lift for the paratransit service for the elderly disabled community. We manage the Safe Route to School program, work closely with COAST. We've contracted with COAST to do the Safe Route to School program in the schools. And we manage the employee work trip program. That's our alternative transportation program for our city employees. And then we manage the bicycle program. Want to talk to council a little bit about the MTD. This last year before council indicated, when I brought the contract for MTD, that we were concerned about a potential shortfall in revenue to operate the shuttle. And we decided to take a look at see how the revenues came in, to see if the revenues came in stronger than we anticipated. Unfortunately, we're about $40,000 short in revenue. We're hoping the fare box would generate more than the $190,000 that were estimated, and we're about $150,000 in revenue. So we've been working with MTD, Sherry Fisher, the general manager, is here too, to answer any questions you might have, on options to bridge that shortfall. And what we're recommending is changing the summer headway for the waterfront shuttle to a 30-minute all-day headway to get our $40,000 savings. Sherry can talk about the leg from the State Street to the zoo on Fridays and Saturdays. That's not going to be affected, but the all-day service between the zoo and the harbor is being recommended to be a 30-minute instead of the 15-minute headway. We also work with MTD to look at other options. One was to eliminate the wharf to harbor service in its entirety. Low ridership, roughly 3.3 riders per hour. In terms of cost benefit, it didn't make sense, but people have gotten used to that type of service. We looked at removing the first hour in the downtown service, as well as the waterfront service. And then when we looked at asking for funding from the waterfront department, $40,000. And we landed on recommending the council that we just change the headway on the all-day service on with the wharf to the harbor.
Did you get any luck with that last one there from the waterfront funding department?
No.
No, I don't think so.
And just so it's clear, what happens is in the rest of the year, other than the summertime, we have a 30-minute headway. So this is just in the summertime. And even in the summertime, as I recall, Ms. Fisher, we have about 10 passengers per trip that ride that shuttle during the summertime. And so that's why we came on that option. It's not heavy ridership versus, for example, what we have on State Street.
Ms. Fisher, do you want to? Hi.
Just to add to that, the average is actually 6 per trip, but the most we have on any trip is 10 at the 15-minute headways. So we do know that if we go to 30-minute headways, there'll be room for the passengers, other than the odd time when it's Fiesta or 4th of July, when there's not room, period. We do intend it to be 30-minute headways all day long into the evening. The good news is the harbor will get some late evening service that way, and our conversation with Scott Reedman was to try to encourage more use of the harbor. I've also had a conversation with Rich Block of the zoo at the encouragement of Mr. Armstrong and ourselves to let them know what's going on, and he's understands, but is certainly willing to work with us to hopefully increase the ridership again so that at some day we could move back to 15-minute headways.
Can you, since you're right there, I know we're talking about the waterfront shuttle, but State Street shuttle, I frequently see very full shuttles and people waiting even just 15 minutes and getting passed over, which sort of defeats the whole purpose of the park once and walk around and use the shuttle. So how frequent is it? Do you have numbers on that?
I can return to you with that, but I don't know off the top of my head. What happens is during most of the year, it's 15-minute headways, and then in the summer, that's reduced or increased service to 10-minute headways. And you're right that depending upon the time of day and the season, there are often times when people are left behind. Often is not a technical term. I'll come back to you with a real number.
And it seems like it, yeah. And is it really, how accurate is the 10-minute headway too? Is it really every 10 minutes? Because sometimes I haven't timed it, maybe I should, but it doesn't, it sometimes feels longer than 10 minutes, and then especially if you can't get on, it's very frustrating.
Then it feels like 20 or 30. And the 10-minute headways is what we've scheduled, what works on a good day, and then when something happens, either in the flow of traffic or the flow of passengers, that can, of course, derail, although we're not rail, but it can derail the fact that we're trying to be 10-minute headways. So, no, it's not perfect. It's the best we can do in the environment. We're talking today only about changing the waterfront portion of it. Certainly, the State Street portion of it would benefit by more service, but we understand that that's all.
Well, if money wasn't an issue, what would be an optimal headway for the State Street shuttle? 7 minutes, 5 minutes?
5 minutes even, right. I mean, but again, that has to be, then you have to be able to count on the bus coming, and it's certainly not parlaying this into a conversation about drivers. We think our drivers are wonderful and do all they can, but depending upon traffic, sometimes you just can't make it.
Right.
So, but if you had 5-minute headways, you'd have enough buses that even when they pulled up with an overload, you'd get the rest of passengers on. You can get comfortably 27 passengers on the bus, or maybe uncomfortably, but you can get them on the bus and safely.
Do you get, I know with the host program through the downtown organization this summer, get any feedback back from the host about this item, whether people comment if they can't get on the shuttle or if it's late, or I don't know if you have any?
A little bit of both, and also the fact that my understanding in listening to them is of what happened a bit when we raised the fares from 25 cents to 50 cents, and you'll all remember that was in response to the loss of the RDA funds, was that there were people who might have ridden for 25 cents who today are saying, well, I'm just going to walk right on by, and that's one of the reasons for a reduction in ridership that was more than we assumed it would be. But if the bus is right there, I think people make a decision at the moment. And then there are people, of course, who want to go all the way from the waterfront to Upper State, and they're actively waiting. But I think I'll take it if it comes, is how frequent does it get there? And that might be the quarter in your pocket.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Allen, remind me, the funding shortfall, it wasn't just moving up to 50 cents to cover the shortfall. There were some other, we reduced the commuter shuttle, right, from the 2 commuter lots, or we eliminated them?
So what we did is we had to bridge the gap of $300,000. So
Right.
we eliminated the commuter lot shuttle from the Creel lot to the downtown. And then MTD eliminated reduced the service on the crosstown shuttle in midday to bridge that gap. And then the other portion was raising the fare from 25 cents to 50 cents.
So really the 40,000 is just the lack of increase in ridership from 25 cents to 50 cents, because we knew what those cost savings were going to be by eliminating the services. Is that
We
accurate?
anticipated, when we put the budget together, we looked at having roughly a $20,000 shortfall going into the current fiscal year, and we were hoping the revenue would be higher, the ridership would be higher, but unfortunately, the ridership dropped off more than we anticipated. Who knows? It was a 100% increase in fares, so people weren't riding, made a decision not to ride.
Well, it's a combo, because if they're too full and you can't get on the bus, then obviously people are riding it, but if the ridership's low, then you're not getting, I don't know. So it's a little more complicated than that.
And so to add to that, certainly the fares going up increased your income, but the income we pass on to the city, but not as much as we anticipated because of the loss of ridership. Okay. And while I have just a second here, I'd like to say, I'm listening to your staff today and want to tell you all as council and city staff that we thoroughly appreciate city staff always being willing to work with us in a cooperative fashion. And sometimes that gets down to calling Jim Dewey to say, what's it like for solar panels? And sometimes it's Pat, Kelly. And I just want to say a thank you for the fact that it's a great relationship.
Thank you. We'll stay up there. I think there's some other questions for you. Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Fisher, so just so we're clear, the waterfront service and the wharf to harbor service, are those more than one line? In other words, the folks that are at the Harbor Way shuttle stop, are they served by just one line or 2 lines?
It's the zoo to the wharf to the harbor, that's one line.
And
that are known as
is that the
waterfront.
wharf to harbor service, or is that the waterfront service?
It's either one you want to call it, but the wharf to harbor side of it would be from the wharf. If you're looking down at the ocean, going to the right to the harbor, we consider it all to be zoo to harbor.
Okay.
But we talked about breaking off that side of it.
Because I can already hear the harbor merchants about this one. And I know that with the cruise ships and their the passenger fees that we collect, the waterfront collects, that part of that goes to funding an extra shuttle for those folks, or extra shuttles for those folks.
Extra 4 shuttles. Yes.
Extra 4 shuttles. And so once again, I'm sure Scott Reedman's watching this with interest right now, but that if we have an exceptional windfall this year of those kinds of fees, so I'm thinking about that as a source. But also, Mr. Allen, the downtown parking is still funding one of those lines, are they not? Or part of one of those lines?
Downtown parking is just giving a lump sum budget money for the shuttle support for the downtown waterfront shuttle. Primarily, I would just say the downtown shuttle of $393,000. That goes towards shuttle support.
Right. So as we look around, because if this entire Lower State Street thing works out the way we think it's going to work out, less shuttles are not going to serve us very well. We're going to need greater shuttle capacity. And I know downtown parking, the committee is working on a Park Once Ride the shuttle program, trying to promote that. So I think we should find a way to try to maintain these lines if we can. Thank you.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is this would it be staff's intent that the call is being made now on this set of options?
We would like to get a consensus from council so MTD can start their planning process. They're going to their board, I believe, next week or the week after with their the budget in their master calendar, so they, in terms of, so they can start their planning efforts. They need to get a read from the council.
Thank you. My comments would be that going from 15 to 30 minutes sounds to me it becomes a fulfilling prophecy here, where the ridership's going to drop some more because this thing isn't accomplishing what transit is intended to accomplish. I know that that all the staff is totally tuned into that. So I'm concerned about I would be wanting to look for an option besides going to 30 minutes. I just feel like 30 minutes, I know, my own reaction is when I see that it's a 30-minute wait, I just go, what other options are there out there, of course, including walking? And so I would hope that we'd have a chance to look at this more carefully. I mean, even if it is that it's a cut somewhere that we're doing, that we be looking at it with the notion of, if it's seasonal, there's all ways to squish this thing around, and I know that staff has studied it, but my gut feeling is to try and keep the headway up and make some other accommodation in terms of seasonality or whatever, some other way, and try and then work outward and the next year in particular is going to be the worst year on the waterfront for construction. Is that maybe the next 2 years?
Well, probably the next 4 years we're going to have
4 years, okay. And so that's another piece of the puzzle that's important to keep in mind when you just have that much disruption going on. How does that dovetail into this discussion? So I'd ask that we have a little more of a conversation about this, because I think there's I would feel more comfortable if we could drill down into this a little bit more.
Well, I would put this on the list of, if we have this extra surplus, and what are the kind of things in terms of services we may want to increase, that maybe this is on the list. But that, you're not going to, I don't know what your timing is, but I forget when that's coming to us.
I think it's going to be early June.
Okay.
And if I may, Madam Mayor, just that also, that list of wants and needs for whatever extra we have is going to be a whole lot longer than that extra.
I agree.
And so I still would like to have the conversation about options here. And as I say, I would be looking at the seasonality as another aspect. And I'm concerned about going to 30 minutes. I just feel like, well, then just shut it down. And I guess one of them is shut it down or shut pieces of it down. And that almost feels like as reasonable as an option as going to 30 minutes. And I don't like either of them, but...
Well, this was a tough conversation. I worked closely with Sherry's staff to come up with some options for council. And we have, in addition to the one that's being recommended, 4 other options that we explored. One of the things we talked about was not having the wharf at the harbor. You average like 3.3, I think, was riders per hour. I think that's the number.
3.3.
That's worse than what the Carrillo commuter lot ridership was. But we know there are some people who like the shuttle. We know the harbor merchants like the fact that the shuttle is going out to the harbor, so we didn't feel that was a good idea. If we were going to pick one of the other ones, maybe we remove the first hour service on the waterfront service. That's one option that the council could, direct staff to work with MTD on, as well as finding some additional funding. What we plan on doing, if we were to go with changing the summer headway to 30 minutes, is evaluate that this summer and see if we have to make any adjustments, see how this affects the service. In talking to Sherry and her staff, the biggest concern is not so much the wharf to the harbor, but the wharf to the zoo leg. How that's going to, because there's a higher ridership on that end of that line, primarily because you have a couple of hotels over there as well as the zoo, and it seems like there's more people riding that leg than going to the zoo.
Plus it's just a longer trip, so it's harder to walk. Yeah.
And there's the little toot. Don't forget the little toot. You have another way of getting from the wharf to the harbor. So
That's true.
The little yellow tugboat thing, the little toot. Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Do we know who these riders are?
We have done some work on that, depending upon which part of the day you're talking about. We know that first hour of the morning on the downtown waterfront particularly on the downtown, it's more likely, it's more percentage that are actually locals who are going to work, et cetera. Now, if you keep asking me, I'll try to pick out the other ones, but that one we know particularly. And we know that generally speaking, on the DWE itself, the whole downtown waterfront, it's about 50-50. People who come to town to visit and shop, hopefully, and have lunch, et cetera.
So 50-50 tourists and local, 50 local, okay. And obviously when the ships are coming in, it's...
When the ships come in, they not only take over those 4 shuttles that we're sending over, but keep in mind we're public transit, so we've got to carefully not say you can't get on if you're not from the ship. So, but it overwhelms the rest of the system, the rest of that whole downtown waterfront system.
Yeah, I would sort of agree with Mr. White. And I think Mr. House or Mr. Rouse that we do need to look at this more carefully.
Okay. I can help you with timing on that, even though I should be standing here saying we need this answer for our budget. Reality is that we're already in the middle of summer process for our drivers bidding, and we will be keeping the service at the level it is today, even without your extra $40,000 worth of support through this summer. So whatever we do, we'll be looking to you to make a decision, hopefully before July when it's our budget process, but we'll be waiting to make any changes for next fall.
So we do have a
Well,
little
actually,
bit of,
next May, I'm sorry.
we do have a little bit of time to look at this.
You do.
Good, thank you.
Harder on my staff, but you do.
Sorry, but I
That's
think
okay.
it's important.
It's important to all of us.
Yeah, the difficult thing is with their bidding process and how they put things together, and by when we come to council with the budget, they already have their summer service planned. So it's really nice that they're going to continue the service this summer, but we really need to give them an answer how we're going to operate this sort of moving forward. So if it's going to be next summer, summer of 14, then if we can have that conversation, that'd be great.
So who's paying the $40,000 this summer?
MTD. My board doesn't know that yet, but
They know now. Okay.
they know now.
Okay. Ms. Murillo and then Mr. House.
Thank you. This is an appropriate matter for our Transportation and Circulation Committee, and with some advertising, the alternative transportation community could come out and give their opinion as well. And if your budgeting doesn't jibe with our budget season, it could be a regular, well, obviously you make regular presentations to the Transportation and Circulation Committee, and this might be an argument for having them meet monthly, which is something I've been advocating for. So if you say that, I was going to ask you, Mr. Allen, when is the next time that the TCC meets to take this up? But if there's a little more wiggle room, then, well, when is the next TCC meeting?
The next TCC meeting is May 23rd. They will be meeting this month. We have a couple of items on the agenda. We certainly can include this as an item for discussion with the committee as well.
Okay. Well, I certainly, I would suggest putting it on the agenda, because if we're going to make budget decisions, I would want to hear their recommendations on this anyway, even though the implementation may not be for a year, but at least start that conversation about what options are there.
Plus, reality is it'll be our budget year coming up in June that will include some of this at the tail end, so it would be helpful. Absolutely.
Mr. House? I'm sorry, were you done, Ms. Murillo? Okay.
Really heartening to hear the comments from my colleagues on council today. I hate to see us lose ground on something that, not just from an alternative transportation, philosophical perspective, but from really a business sense and a hospitality sense and a relationship to visitors. And it's funny because it's not exactly the usage in this moment that counts. It even goes to the impression of our community as an incredibly easy way to get around kind of community. I'm really strong for us looking at how to increase our service on State Street, how to increase our service in this area, because those frequencies do engender kind of the other side of the vortex, engender more ridership, and that frequency really does benefit. But I'm wondering about some of the other possibilities. The properties that are along there, I'm speaking now in CVB technology language, but the hotels, their concierge could be, bless you, their concierge have the opportunity to promote. It becomes, there needs to be maybe a more active effort somehow to to utilize this. Maybe even the routing has, there's other destinations in the neighborhood there. We've been seeing an increase in interest in utilization of the Yananali little corridor there. I don't know if you would want to get off the main drag to get over there, but we're going to have a Park Once opportunity when La Entrada comes in. That's another few years, a couple years down the road. But this is where we're going. And I wonder if there's corporate sponsorship opportunities. The zoo would be a definite beneficiary. And with the ships coming in right now, it's a little bit of a burden because we're getting used to it. But there's a revenue source there somehow. There's a pass that gets sold on the ship along with something that is the one pass while you're in town. You can get around everywhere, including the shuttles. There's additional revenue in them there hills. And I say with the economy increasing, we're seeing the occupancy rates up higher, TOT certainly, but that continues to increase. Our marketing efforts are being effective. So let's market the shuttles. That should be a coordination with Conference and Visitors Bureau. That image of the shuttle should be in our advertising, and they could help coordinate that, and that benefits the businesses and the whole enterprise. So I think instead of a problem, this is an opportunity. I'd really like us to take it that way.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It just occurs to me, this may be totally verboten, but are we allowed to actually, say, drive into Fess Parker, into their area there, so that we can actually pick up people right there instead of, I mean, I know it's just a minor thing. You could say, we'll go out in front of the street, but people are a little reluctant sometimes to do that. So it would add time, a little bit of cost to the route, but there might be a couple of stops where we could do that. Is that a thought worth thinking?
It's worth thinking about. We want to be cautious, of course. Anytime we're on private property, we have to have all of that legal language resolved. But then the other half of it would be that it's going to take a little longer, and people are always reticent to wait any longer than they need to on the bus. But as you said that, I was also thinking, well, maybe we need to just get people encouraged to ride it by getting over there and showing them what it's like, and making that part of our marketing, getting there and taking them to the shuttle and then showing them where from then on. There's all sorts of possibilities that would make it.
I didn't quite understand what you meant.
Well, if we actually take a shuttle over there and do some ride-alongs, like those of you that rode to Old Mission with us the other day, that was wonderful, and getting people to encouraged to be comfortable on the shuttle.
Hey, anything that'll, just move the needle a little bit, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Okay, so thank you, Ms. Fisher. I think you're hearing from us. We don't necessarily like the original recommendation, and we have to talk about this a little more, and we'd like to hear from TCC in their meeting this month, and I guess we'll have this conversation a little more at the Waterfront Department budget hearing, and I'm sure they'll tell you all the great reasons why it should not come from that budget, but that's part of it. Is that pretty much where we're, for now, saying? Okay. Okay. I know you have more in your presentation.
Okay, some projects that we're going to be working on this next fiscal year. Last year, we received from SBCAG a Measure A bike pedestrian grant to do a transit center module over the transit center. It's actually going to be located in City Parking Lot 3 next to the transit center. I mentioned this to the council last year when we came to the council with a cooperative agreement with SBCAG. A lot of the transit users who actually use the transit center have been complaining about not having a place to securely park the bicycle overnight when they get on the bus to go home. So this is in response to that. We, again, continue to manage the Safe Route to School program. The slide didn't get changed, so I talked about some of these. But the Cleveland Safe Route to School project is one that we got a grant last year. It's a federal grant, and we got the matching funds from again, the Measure A program. I shared this slide with the council a couple of weeks ago at the joint school district meeting. We're at Cacique Street and Salina Street. Derek Bailey took a look at this location and is recommending that we realign the curb. The existing curb line is back in this area here, so it's a pretty wide area for the students to transverse. So this is a project that's currently under design right now with the engineering group. In addition to that, they're going to be installing the rectangular rapid flashers on Salina Street at Cacique and Clifton Street as well as putting some access ramps in where they're missing. We also received this year, and I'll be coming to council in a few weeks with the amendment to the cooperative agreement, we received a Measure A grant this year from the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments to put some pedestrian refuge islands in around Franklin and Adelante School over on the east side. And this is kind of a little diagram of what they would look like. Again, this is something that, again, our traffic engineer worked with and working closely with the school site administrators and COAST and the parents as to what their intersections were of a concern. We also heard these intersections out of the East Side Neighborhood Transportation Planning effort that we've been working on as being concerned. So we applied for the grant, and we're successful in receiving funds to do these 6 locations over on the east side, and these 3 locations on the west over by Lacumba Junior High School. So engineering recently completed the reconfiguration of the intersection of Modoc and Portezuelo, and this is just finishing that project off to make it a little bit safer for our students as they walk to school.
So these are separate from the other series of recommendations you're going to bring to us in June about the East Side Traffic Management Plan. This is in addition to that.
They will be included in the plan, but they're already funded and underway because we have funding for it.
And then but there's a whole bunch of other opportunities that we are going to discuss and that will be budgeted in the following year, perhaps.
Following year, how we'll be coming to council with some ideas of how we can possibly fund those improvements.
Thank you. Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The pedestrian refuge islands, whatever you call them, at Franklin, does that eliminates or restricts a car turning left to, let's say, going,
like this direction?
Yeah.
No, they will not. Our traffic engineer, before he would recommend putting anything in on the ground, he would work with the engineering design staff to do a turning template to make sure it doesn't impede vehicles traveling.
Because that's one, I'm trying to think, is that 2 lanes or one lane each way?
Maintain 1 lane in each direction on the street, so 1 lane.
And that's what it is now, is 1 lane in each direction?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. White?
Thank you,
We'll just
Madam
go
Mayor.
across.
I know that the Neighborhood Advisory Council has weighed in on the various transportation traffic activities, and I think it would be a good idea if at least a little report or message could be sent to the NAC about these responses. I mean, it's coming through some creative side channels, but it would be helpful, I think, information for them to receive.
Well, we were scheduled to go to the NAC this month on the 15th, but their schedule got changed around, so we're probably going to go to the NAC in June with a report of our findings and working with the residents on the east side. And we're going to be focusing our presentation at the NAC on how do we pay for these improvements. And the TCC will be hearing the actual neighborhood enhancement plan that the residents have identified, and that will be at the May meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Allen, on the mid-block or the refuge island diagram, what do the little green bits on the sidewalk represent?
These areas here?
Yeah.
Typically planter strips.
I'm sorry?
Parkway planters.
Parkway, okay, very good. And then my next question was about the bike station plan for Lot 3. Now, I know what our situation is in the in the Granada lot with the bike station. I remain unconvinced of its utility. Is this going to be also run by the same vendor, or are we going to run it, or how's this going to work?
Well, we're currently in conversation with the current vendor that they run both facilities at no additional cost to the city. We have maintaining the incentive in their contract that they don't get their marketing money until they increase their membership. So for the current fiscal year, they increased their membership by, I think, 19 new members. So they went from 50 to 69 members, and now we have reset their baseline for moving from the next fiscal year at 69, so we wanted them to continue to work on increasing the membership. Obviously, we add additional 30 bicycle parking spots in our downtown. We want to make sure they continue to grow the membership. We have looked at the possibility of staff running the bike station. The downtown parking staff, that is an option, but at least what I like to focus our staff attention on is operating the parking system and not operate a bike facility, at least at this point in time.
Well, I remember the conversation. I mean, this makes more sense to me at Lot 3 than it does certainly at the Granada Garage. I know that downtown parking spends $25,000 in subsidies to the vendor, but at the same time, downtown parking is actually doing the physical maintenance of the janitorial and whatnot of that particular station. So, and with the ridership and whatnot, it hasn't been particularly successful. This might make more sense, and if you can, I guess, get the vendor to do both of them without increasing the subsidy, that might be something to look at. But I wouldn't want to continue what we're doing currently and only do that.
Yeah, I have been real clear with the current operator that $25,000 to do both facilities, with 18 to 20 being the base, and then the other 5 for marketing. And the other thing that I have requesting in their contract is they get involved in some of our community events like Earth Day, Bike to Work Day, the Cyclemania program, and they did participate in Earth Day, and they did an event last week over at the bike station, at the kickoff of Cyclemania. So it's just not collect the money, operate the system. We want them to be more actively involved in their community, as well as continue to market and increase the membership in both of our facilities. And we'll evaluate the uses of the new facility as well as the existing facility. In a couple of years, we're going to see if we're seeing a huge shift of users over to this facility, to see if we want to do something different at the existing facility or just what. So that's something that's on our radar screen to continue to monitor both facilities as we move forward.
Thank you.
Mr. House?
I wasn't going to comment on that until just hearing the questions there. They're up to 69 members in the current facility right now.
Correct.
It's I mean, maybe it's hard to really quantify, but some number of those people are choosing to ride their bicycle as opposed to bring their car. The other ones would probably bring their bike anyway. They just wouldn't put it in the bike station. But the number of parking spaces the amount of physical space that the bike station takes compared to the amount of space it would take to provide those parking spaces, it's a big offset. And I don't know if I would say it's unsuccessful. Maybe it's not as wildly successful as we were hoping for. But one of the things that sort of surprises me is that we're continuing with that same vendor if we're getting marginal response to the outreach and the community effort part of it. I know Ed France and a group of others had been part of those who are really looking at the possibility of running it as a kind of a community gathering space opportunity to really celebrate bicycling and not just provide a place to park the bike. And I would hope that as we move forward into the future, if we're really serious about having this be successful, as I think Mr. Rouse and others would rather it to be, we need to have a really actively community-engaged proprietor. And this isn't the hearing to make that decision, but I just put that out there as where we should be putting our efforts, is to ensure that they're fulfilling the spirit of it. The reason I clicked on was to just ask for the status of the mobility coordinator. I understand that is included in this budget, and I'm hopeful that it is. And then that was really an important aspect of the implementation of the circulation element, that we would have somebody who would be shepherding that balance of modes. And it's so easy for some of our major deficiencies to suck away all the funds into the streets maintenance and all that. There's opportunities to have these things work together. There needs to be an effort to keep the balance and to ensure that the pedestrian opportunities are addressed and all the other. So confirm for me, please, that the mobility coordinator is in the budget.
Yes, it is in the budget, and I'm pleased to let council know that Sarah Grant, who was the person in the previous commission position, was in the office last week, and she is coming back to work for the city.
Well, that's really good news. Thank you, Brownie. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and just to kind of get back on the bike station just a little bit, that was a kind of a first time doing a bike station in the city. Some lessons learned in terms of staffing. When we envisioned the bike station, we didn't have a clue of what it was going to be and how it was going to operate. So in terms of the first 5 or 6 years of its operation, it operated exactly how staff envisioned it. Moving forward, we have had conversations with the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition, and they have informed us that they are focusing their attention on their new facility over on Haley Street, and they're not interested in doing this facility. We will continue to partner with them on special events and other things as we see improving bicycle programs within our community. But in terms of running this facility, that is not an option. The only other option we were looking at is running it ourselves.
Well, maybe my comments stand as a an encouragement to get the spirit of it up there, because clearly it's a marketing thing. It's a remote. It's a celebration of that bicycling. It's and why that's of value. It really is of value. It does reduce traffic on our streets, and it's healthy and all the rest. But it needs to be brought up as an encouragement, not just a facility, just passively sitting there. That's the distinction. Thank you.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you. Mr. Allen, so the mobility coordinator position duties will be the same as they were before?
That's correct.
Okay. And I just want you to know I'm really happy about the refuge islands near the elementary schools there. Those of us who have attended the East Side Walks and went to the public workshops that your department put on, we heard from the people who use those streets. And I mean, I use the streets when I'm there myself. And really on Mason, going right by both Adelante and Franklin, I really, as a pedestrian, I really have to stop and make sure that the cars see me, because they really just zip through there. So I'm very, very pleased, and I'm so happy. I'm going to inappropriately blow you a little kiss. Mwah. Thank you. Thank you. On behalf of the residents there who try to get their kids across the street, thank you.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple more comments on the bike station. So the one that we're looking at here, I don't know where it's showing up in the numbers. Can you help me get from that to this book on the numbers for that particular project?
Yeah, Chris and I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago. It's not in this document. It was in last year's document. Recently included in this presentation. It is something that's currently under design, and we're going to actually be coming to council in a few months with a contract to purchase the facility. So the bike station group is the one who's actually, they came up with a concept, so they're going to provide us with the module, and then we're going to be going out to bid to hire a contractor to install it. So it was appropriate last fiscal year in our capital improvement program. And it's just one of these projects that's underway. I just want to let the City Council know that this is a major project that is being built in our downtown area that's pretty visible to our community.
And how much is it going to cost?
Total cost for it is roughly $175,000, and most of it is out of the grant from SBCAG.
Okay. I hadn't remembered that from last year. This is okay. And I want to just weigh in also on the comments, or agree with most of the comments that were made about the bike station at the Granada Garage. It's just, it just hasn't felt like it's been working properly. I've been skeptical about it from the get-go, and I hope that we can come up with some ways to make it sing a little more harmoniously and louder. Thank you.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry to beat a dead horse here, but from what you said, is this a portable unit they're bringing in? You know what I mean? It's a prefab thing.
It's similar to when you buy a mobile home, where you come in and you put on you have the foundations, right, and you bring in, you set it in place. It's similar to that. So if sometime in the future, if there was a need to relocate it, it could be done, but you have to hire a contractor to crane it out and put it in a different location.
So it could be removed if it didn't work.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I lost my thought. I think that's everything here. How are we, I know Rebecca's been extremely patient, but do we need a short break? I think we need a short break. Okay, so we'll take a short break and then get to water and wastewater. Thanks. Patience, and we'll move on to the water resources section of the budget.
And Ms. Bjork is here to present that.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I hope it won't throw you off a little too much. I am addressing the water resources budget sort of as the water flows from our supplies on through to the ocean. So I can reference budget pages if you like, or I have those noted if you want them after the fact. Water resources is budgeting $71 million in expenditures for fiscal year 14 and $62 million in revenues. The difference is made up by a planned use of reserves. So it's a big program. It is comprised of water and both water supply, water and wastewater divisions or sections. The Water Capital Program is managed by the Water Resources Management, and I've got a picture here depicting one of our major capital programs for the upcoming year, which is the replacement of the existing recycled water treatment plant with a new technology, which you've all heard about extensively. But this is a graphic that sort of shows what it would look like at the El Estero treatment plant. That is one of the big uses of reserves in the water program budget. Water supply management is responsible for managing our water supplies, and the costs for water supplies in the fiscal year 14 budget are $7.8 million. That is kind of misleading because our water supplies, those costs aren't actually variable with how much water we purchase. It's more how much the infrastructure and maintenance of our facilities like the Kachuma Reservoir and the State Water Project cost. So this is pretty much a fixed cost regardless of how much water we take from those facilities. Those are broken out into three basic different costs. One is the COMB budget, which is about $2.2 million, the CCRB budget, which is about $800,000, and the State Water Project budget, which is about $4.6 million. And they're all related to the cost of operating and maintaining those water supplies. And it's not going.
We need to make the thing on the bottom go away.
Oh, I don't know how to do that. We were doing fine until we stopped. Thank you. Okay. An important part of our water supply program is our water conservation program, because in controlling the amount of demand that we have, we're able to limit the amount of water that we need, water supplies that we need to develop, and water supplies are extremely expensive. The budget for the non-water purchases portion of the water supply management budget, which is where water conservation is $1.7 million. However, only a portion of that is actually for conservation. The remainder pays for other projects associated with water supply management, like working with the USGS for monitoring our groundwater levels throughout the city, as well as money that we've set aside to be able to pay the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation when we get to the point of being able to store Gibraltar water in the Kachuma Reservoir. So of the $1.7 million, a portion of that is for staffing, and then about $200,000 pays for the actual water conservation programs that our staff implements, including rebate programs. The Gibraltar Reservoir is another of our supplies. It's a city-owned reservoir. Unlike the other supplies which are managed and owned by others, this is actually a water supply owned and operated by the city. The annual budget there has gone up quite a bit. This fiscal, we're projecting it to go up quite a bit this fiscal year. There are 2 full-time staff there. They make up a substantial part of this budget, but the increase is being caused by maintenance work needed at the intake tower for the water supply to the Mission Tunnel. The picture on the lower left shows the inside of the Mission Tunnel. And we also are buying a new motor for the boat and some safety equipment and things needed up there. So the increase in that budget is due to those one-time expenses. Water flows through Mission Tunnel to the Cater Water Treatment Plant. The treatment budget in your budget pages is actually 2 different programs that are together for budgeting purposes. The first is Cater, and you can see the treatment plant aerial here. This is the new ozone facility. These are a couple of our operators hard at work. The operator staffing, FTEs, we have about 13 operators up there, and their salaries make up less than half of the cost of operating. A big part of the cost of operating there is the materials and supplies, particularly chemicals and waste disposal. The significant expenses associated with the operation of Cater are the electrical, waste disposal, and chemicals. And we're expecting a fairly flat budget there, even as we transition to ozone, because the new cost of treatment at Cater had gone up so extensively because of the increased sediment from the Zaka fire. It's stabilized somewhat, but it's still higher than it used to be, and ozone should be pretty close, although the distribution of costs will change. More money going to electrical and less to chemicals, we hope. The other part of that water treatment budget is the other treatment plants we operate. The top left picture is the well treatment plant that's currently under rehabilitation. Should be done by June or July. That treats groundwater from 4 downtown wells. And the Charles Meyer desalination facility, which is in long-term storage, the annual cost for maintaining that is about $60,000. It's comprised of very basic work to make sure that we don't have deferred maintenance problems. We do painting and corrosion control and basic landscape. There's a big change in this budget this year. We've added about $800,000, and that reflects the projected cost of treatment at the groundwater treatment plant. Since that plant had been offline for a long period of time, we hadn't been incurring those costs. However, as we're starting it up again, we have budgeted for the chemicals and other equipment and materials necessary to operate that plant. I do want to point out there are no increased staff requirements for that plant. At least we've been told again and again there shouldn't be. It will be remotely operated from Cater, and they will send operators down as needed to operate the plant. So all of the budget increases in this particular area are due to material supplies. After the water is treated, it's sent into our water distribution system, and we operate we have 31.75 full-time equivalent positions. We operate 300 miles of mains, 23,000 service connections, 12 reservoirs, 12 pumping stations, 18 pressure-reducing stations, 5 wells that don't have treatment, and the materials and expense are about the same as it's about 50-50 with salaries in terms of expenses. A significant expense for us in this budget is our vehicle expense because all of our operators are out in the field and they need vehicles, so that is a significant expense. All of that equipment that we operate and maintains requires a lot of maintenance planning, and this year we have asked for a new position, which is a maintenance planner position who will specialize on just looking at what work is coming up, making sure it's packaged up, all the equipment and materials and supplies needed to do the work are there and ready to go. Work order is created and assigned, work gets done, it gets recorded, and any information coming in from the completion of that work is recorded, because that's really helps us inform future work needs and make sure that we know what's coming up in terms of our facility assets. So that is a recommended new position. Our recycled water system is the last of our supplies. It's 13.4 miles of pipeline, 3 pump stations, and 2 reservoirs. We have 5 full-time equivalents assigned to the recycle plant, but both for at the treatment plant, doing the operations and maintenance of the treatment plant, as well as distribution and system operators. So they're split between the 2 areas. And importantly, as we've been talking, all of this takes money, and our revenue sources are meters. We have 6 full-time equivalent, well, 6 full-time meter readers who read the 23,000 meters that we have every month. This budget is almost entirely salaries. It pays for the cost of reading the meters. In the coming year, we will be undertaking a major meter replacement program, and at the same time, we'll be using that as an opportunity to look at the technologies available for meter reading and see whether there's an opportunity to capitalize on new technologies, both for the purposes of reducing costs and for the purposes of potentially offering better information to our customers in terms of actual time of use of water, being able to alert them to water leaks, and helping us control issues like water loss in our system. So we'll be evaluating whether that makes sense for the city, whether it's a cost-effective thing to do. Meters are a revenue source, so for us to take any action here, it really needs to make sense financially. I do want to say that meters are our best conservation tool, as water bills send a very strong conservation message, so that's important as well. In terms of funding all of this, this is a picture of our long-term financial plan, and this last year, as you're aware, we've done a rate study to revise the way that we distribute rates to our customers. We have made fairly minor changes to the rates in terms of how they're applied, with some more significant changes in the area of irrigation. What you're looking at here is how we see our reserves meeting our capital plan, assuming, and it's going to be somewhere between a 3% and 4% revenue increase through this period of time. You can see that we're planning to have revenues meet policy reserves. This is the policy reserve component throughout up until 2022. And that's far enough out that we're comfortable with this at this time, and we'll be revisiting it several times before we get there. And we will either make changes to our anticipated capital or make a different recommendation on rates to the council at that time. In terms of what rate changes are looking like for our customers, this is a chart that shows us compared to our closest neighbors, all of whom have fairly similar supply sources, so fairly similar source of water costs. And you can see that the two darker blue colors are the cities. The current rate for city is, for a typical single-family residence, is $67.75 a month, and the typical rate is projected to go up to $67.81. And so you can see that's not a 3% increase. It's a very, very small increase. It has to do with this cost of service reallocation to better match the way that water costs are captured from the water users, to make sure that each person is paying as close to their fair share as we can calculate. For comparison, Goleta Water District's customer with the same type of connection would be paying $92.17. Montecito is $77.75, and Carpinteria Valley is $94.04.
Are those rates as of today, or are any of those other rates going?
Those are
scheduled to be
their current
increased?
rates. We haven't projected. I don't believe any of them have adopted their next fiscal year rates yet.
Do we know what's proposed?
I know that Montecito is suggesting a 5-year plan of rate increases that will total 55% over that 5-year period. But I don't know how it's breaking out. The Goleta, I think, I will speculate that it's in the 7% range, but I'm really not sure about that. But
So this is prior to anything that would be increased by July 1
That's
for
correct.
the other agencies?
Right. And
okay. Thank you.
I
Any
will-
other questions at this point on this end of the water supply distribution? Now we go to the
other end.
The other side.
So as we use that water, and it is sent through our homes, it ends up here at the El Estero Wastewater Treatment Plant, just a stone's throw away from the beach. The way it gets there is through our wastewater collection system. You are, I think, all well aware after last week's presentation that we operate 257 miles of publicly owned sewer main. We have 17.3 full-time equivalents in the collection system budget. I did want to point out, we talk about cleaning the sewer lines, and this is a great picture of what we call a plumber's roots or a root ball. And we fortunately very seldom find this. As you know from our presentation, 98% of our pipes come back clean, but sometimes we get this kind of thing in there. This is a picture of our staff out ahead of a rainy season. Our collection system is designed only to take water from inside homes. It's really just not hydraulically capable of taking rain from even a very small rainfall, which can distribute millions of gallons of water onto the city within a short period of time. So to prevent rain from leaking into the sewer in low-lying areas, staff will go out and put these rubber discs in the manholes to keep the water from getting into the sewer system. So that's just one of the little things they do that most people don't know about. It goes through the collection system to the wastewater treatment plant. It's an 11 million gallon design treatment plant with a total budget of $6.7 million. This is the activated sludge basins while they're out of service and they're doing work to rehabilitate the diffusers. Just to give you a sense of size, even though these are school kids, this is a grown-up man, and these are our pumps. They're big pumps. They can pump more than 10 million gallons of water per day. And then we have to operate and maintain all of this equipment. And like the water treatment budget, salaries are a smaller portion of the component of this budget. We operate not only the equipment at the water treatment plant out of this budget, but also all of the 9 lift stations that are out throughout our distribution system. And these are pictures of our staff out working on those lift stations. Finally, we operate a water resources laboratory. There are 7 laboratory analysts. They complete over 50,000 analyses of water and wastewater samples each year, as well as providing contract services for other departments like Parks and Rec's Creek Division and the waterfront. Their costs are distributed between salaries and materials and supplies, but heavily weighted to salaries. With regard to water financial planning, this picture is really only focusing on the first 2 years. We started doing a cost of service analysis for wastewater in this past year and got a preliminary result that was such that made us realize we really need to collect some more local information about wastewater strength, because wastewater strength is what determines how the costs are allocated. And the information we were using was just industry-based, and because we have so much conservation in Santa Barbara, we believe that there might be some local tweaks here. So we will be coming back to council in the next couple of months asking for authorization to do a more comprehensive wastewater cost of service analysis, as well as doing a multi-year financial plan. So we won't be looking at this kind of financial picture for the wastewater system. I do want to say, just to go back, this financial plan does contemplate borrowing about $20 million in this next 2 fiscal years. So even with that capital infusion, the continued need for rehabilitation at the wastewater plant is substantial. It's 35 years old. It's a very corrosive environment, and we just basically need to work our way through the plant, replacing different components. As far as wastewater rates go, it's very similar to our water picture, where we're fairly close to our neighbors in cost. Goleta Sanitary is at $37.80. Again, that's current. I don't know what the proposed is. We're at $39.21 and projecting to go to $40.78. That's a maximum bill for us, because whereas the other agencies have a flat bill, we actually bill based on how much water you use in your house. So, and it's capped at 10 units. So if you're using more than 10 units in your house, we're assuming you're using it outside and you don't pay wastewater charges on it. So that's it for the wastewater portion.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Bjork, when you talk about borrowing money, we're talking about vis-a-vis some type of bond or certificate of participation. How do you borrow that money?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, we are currently pursuing a state revolving fund loan because that's our cheapest alternative. We can get very good interest rates down in the range of 2%, and it has other attractive parts to it, like when we start to repay debt. And but if we aren't able to secure that money by September or October, we will be looking into selling COPs, because we have budgeted that revenue source in this fiscal year, because we are confident that we will need it and we will secure it either through a loan or through a COP. So we are actively working on that.
Other questions? Mr. House?
Ms. Bjork, on the slide where you showed about the wastewater revenues, just a couple slides back, you mentioned that the study that you're talking about is going to take a look at what we're actually doing here in Santa Barbara as opposed to industry standards. And what do you anticipate? Tell us a little bit more about that. Do you see us, as we true it up, do you have any idea that we're going to be needing less or needing more, or, what's the trend anyway?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember House, the study that we'll be doing will actually be looking at the actual waste strength from different types of users, not what our financial needs are.
Oh, I see.
So it's about how to allocate the costs among all of our different users, not how much money we need, although we will also be looking at how much money we need and how to accomplish getting the necessary revenues with the least impact to customers, so smoothing it over the period of time that we're planning.
Okay, so there's two pieces to it. The one is that larger picture, and the other one is actually getting it to the particular kind of user, exactly what it is that they're generating, so that we apportion the costs properly to them.
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Could you go back to the recycled water?
Yeah.
Is there any thought, would it be worthwhile? I know it's costly to close that loop, going downtown somehow. I'm just trying to, any expansion in the horizon?
We have done an extensive study. It's funny you say that. You're thinking like a distribution operator. They would love to do that. Because water quality, keeping water moving through a system is an important part of managing quality. We have looked at lots of opportunities for expanding the recycled water program. It's very expensive. It requires the extension of the pipelines, and that is about $250 a foot, and disruptive in that you have to, open the entrench in public right-of-way. So we're really looking for opportunities along our existing infrastructure as much as possible and trying to limit the extension needs to the greatest extent possible. We have identified about 300 acre-feet of additional demand that we think we can achieve with minimal extensions of the collection system, in part by getting customers who are already being served in part by recycled water to use more of it for their landscaping. So the zoo had most of their system on recycled water, and now they're going to loop the rest of their irrigation to recycled water and increase their demand, that kind of thing. So that's where we're looking first. At the same time, if we could find a funding source to do a larger project, and recycled water is one of the places where there are still some grant opportunities for funding. So we continue to watch that and keep that on our radar to try and see if we can get grant funding, because that makes that much more attractive.
And how much recycled water typically is used in a year?
We have, our total demand is about 14,000 acre-feet, of which about 800 acre-feet is recycled water. I do want to caveat that right now, because of the performance of our treatment plant, we aren't producing nearly that much recycled water. We're using predominantly potable water because we're having so much trouble with the existing plant. So that's one of the reasons to push forward with the other plant as fast as we can, and really for changing the technology so it'll be more reliable.
So it'll go from 8,000 to 14. So
800.
800.
And our projected use is about 1,200 acre-feet. So about 400 acre-feet.
Because that's a significant helping us with water supply on the other end of it.
It's helpful in the water supply for two reasons. One, it's an added supply, but the other is it's really one of the very few drought-proof supplies we have. We're always going to have sort of that baseline, reliable amount of water, and that's worth a lot because it compounds year to year to year and lets you save up other supplies that may be more variable. The other place that really helps us is we are compelled to comply with mandatory water conservation standards, and recycled water will help us achieve those mandatory standards.
Great. Thank you. Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On that as well, today, our reclaimed water system requires a substantial amount of potable water to be going through that system. So even though we have this 800 acre-foot throughput, a lot of that is potable water at this point. We're just kind of substituting. So the system that is proposed here is one that would be weaning us off of the potable water, and would it be 100%, or maybe not 100%, but at least very substantially more non-potable water.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, we have historically used potable water to bring down the dissolved solids, the salts in the water. That's a discretionary use. Council has opted to do that historically to meet the concerns of our customers. The plant that we are planning follows the direction given in the long-term supply plan to develop a plan to completely eliminate the need for potable water blending by the end of the planning period, which is 2030. We have developed that plan, and we have got preliminary design which would add an RO unit on after the membrane filtration plant that I showed in slide, I think, 71. That would allow us to completely eliminate the water for blending. However, it's expensive to do so, so we're postponing that portion until we get closer and we can evaluate the cost benefit of doing so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I know we still need to reschedule the city attorney budget hearing. Do we have a potential date for that yet? Or?
Yes, that's going to be next, I think it's Monday when we have the airport and the waterfront budget. It'll be the first one of those.
Great. And I think that's our next budget hearing. So we'll see you then, although we'll see you here tomorrow for a council meeting. Thank you. We're adjourned.